Welcome, little ones. I am Tung Tung Sahur, the guardian of stories that must be told. Tonight, I bring you a tale from the Italian Brainrot universe, a story of love, of loss, of coffee cups who dared to dream. This is Sallow, where the strangest stories hide the deepest truths. Tonight you will meet Cappuccino Assassino, a ninja with a coffee cup for a head and a heart that was shattered like porcelain. Before we begin, if you enjoy this tale of broken hearts and sharp katanas, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me, which character's story should I share next? Now, close your eyes. Let the story wash over you, and remember, even the strongest coffee can grow cold. The story begins in a small Italian village nestled between rolling green hills and ancient olive groves, where the sun always seemed to shine just a little bit brighter than anywhere else in the world, where the cobblestone streets smelled perpetually of fresh bread and espresso, where time itself moved at a slower, more peaceful pace. There lived a coffee cup. But this was no ordinary coffee cup. This was not one of those fancy porcelain cups that sat on shelves in museums, gathering dust and admiring glances. This was not a delicate teacup with painted flowers and gold trim. No, this was a simple to-go coffee cup, the kind you might grab from a cafe on a busy Monday morning. Cardboard body, plastic lid, a little sleeve to keep your hands from burning. His name was Cappuccino. Just Cappuccino. Not yet an assassino, not yet a killer. Not yet a name whispered in fear across the Italian Brainrot universe. Just a simple to-go coffee cup with two bright eyes, two cardboard arms that creaked slightly when he moved, and two sturdy legs that carried him through his simple, beautiful life in the most peaceful village in all of Italy. The village was called Soleado, which means sunny, and it truly lived up to its name. Every morning, without fail, the sun would rise over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and gold, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, making everything glow with a warm, inviting light that made you feel safe, made you feel home, made you feel like nothing bad could ever happen, in a place so beautiful. Every single morning, Cappuccino would wake up to the sound of church bells. The old church at the center of the village had bells that had been ringing for 300 years. They had a particular sound, a particular rhythm, that everyone in the village knew by heart. 3 long chimes, then 2 short ones, then 3 long ones again. It was the heartbeat of the village, the pulse that reminded everyone that they were part of something bigger, something older, something that would continue long after they were gone. Cappuccino lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread would drift up through the floorboards, filling his small room with warmth and comfort. He would lie in his little bed, which was really just a soft cushion in the corner, and he would breathe in that smell and think about how lucky he was. How incredibly, impossibly lucky he was to live in this place, to wake up to this smell, to have this life. He would stretch his little cardboard arms, hearing them creak slightly, feeling the satisfying pop of joints that had been still all night. He would adjust his plastic lid, making sure it was sitting just right on his head, and then he would stand up, walk to his small window, and look out at the village square below. The square was the heart of Soleado. It was where everything happened. In the center stood an ancient fountain carved from marble centuries ago by someone whose name had been forgotten but whose art lived on. Water flowed constantly from the mouth of a stone lion, cascading down into a wide basin where children would sometimes splash on hot summer days. Around the fountain, benches sat in the shade of old olive trees, trees that had been saplings when the fountain was new, trees that had seen generations of villagers come and go, fall in love, grow old, pass away, and yet the trees remained, constant, eternal, peaceful. Every morning, Cappuccino would leave his little apartment, walk down the narrow wooden stairs that creaked under his weight, wave good morning to Signora Biscotti, who owned the bakery, and make his way to the village square. He loved the morning. He loved it more than any other time of day. He loved the way the golden light hit the old buildings, making their faded yellow and pink and orange walls glow like they were lit from within. He loved the way the air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of flowers from the gardens that every house in the village seemed to have. He loved the sound of the fountain, always flowing, always peaceful. A constant reminder that life goes on, water keeps moving, time keeps passing. And that's okay. That's beautiful. That's the way it should be. He would walk across the square, his footsteps echoing on the ancient stones, and he would think about how many other footsteps had crossed these same stones. How many other coffee cups, or espresso shots, or cappuccinos, or whatever beings lived in this village had walked this exact path. Hundreds, thousands, millions. The thought made him feel small, but in a good way. Small and connected, part of something vast and ancient and ongoing. Cappuccino worked at a small cafe on the western edge of the square. It was called Caffè Sole, which meant soon cafe, and it was owned by an old espresso cup named Signor Espressini, who had run the place for 40 years. The cafe itself was nothing fancy, nothing to write home about, nothing that would ever be featured in a travel magazine or win any awards. Just a simple place with 6 small tables, each covered with a red and white checkered tablecloth. A long wooden bar where Signor Espressini would stand and prepare drinks. A shelf behind the bar lined with cups and saucers of all different sizes and colors. And a window that looked out onto the square, where you could sit and watch the world go by while sipping your coffee. But what made Cafe Sol special wasn't the decor or the menu or the location. What made it special were the people who came there. This was the place where the old men of the village would gather every morning at precisely 7 o'clock to argue about football. They would sit at the same table they had been sitting at for 20 years, order the same drinks they always ordered, and have the same arguments they had been having since anyone could remember. "Juventus is the best team," one would shout. "You're crazy, Milan is clearly superior," another would counter. And they would go back and forth, getting louder and more animated, but never actually angry, because it wasn't about winning the argument. It was about having the argument, about being with friends, about having a place to go and people who expected you to be there. This was the place where mothers would bring their children for hot chocolate on cold winter afternoons. The children would sit at the small tables, their little hands wrapped around warm cups, their faces lighting up as they took that first sip of sweet, rich chocolate. They would get it all over their faces, and their mothers would laugh and wipe them clean with napkins. And everyone in the cafe would smile because there's something about the pure joy of a child that makes everyone feel a little bit lighter. This was the place where lovers would come and sit for hours over a single cup of coffee. Young couples, old couples, new lovers who couldn't stop staring at each other. Married couples who had been together so long they didn't need to talk. They could just sit in comfortable silence and be together. They would hold hands across the table. They would share a pastry. They would watch the sunset through the window. And time would stop, just for a little while, just for them. And Cappuccino? He was happy. Truly, genuinely, deeply happy in a way that most people never get to experience. He had never wanted to be anything more than what he was. He had never dreamed of being a fancy porcelain cup in a museum. He had never wished he was a gold-plated chalice in a cathedral. He had never looked at his simple cardboard body and wished for something more elaborate, more expensive, more impressive. He was content to be a simple cup, a vessel for warmth, a container for comfort, something that helped people, that brought a little bit of joy to their day, that made their mornings better and their afternoons brighter. That was enough for him. That was more than enough. That was everything. He would spend his days making coffee, cappuccinos, espressos, lattes, macchiatos, americanos, every kind of coffee drink you could imagine. He took pride in his work, real pride. He would carefully measure the espresso, steam the milk to exactly the right temperature, create perfect foam with just the right consistency, pour it with a steady hand to create beautiful designs on the surface, hearts, leaves, flowers. Little works of art that would last for just a moment before being drunk. But that moment mattered. That moment brought a smile to someone's face. That moment made their day just a tiny bit better. And those tiny moments, Cappuccino believed, those were what life was really about. In the afternoons, when the cafe was quiet, when the lunch rush was over and the dinner crowd hadn't arrived yet, Cappuccino would sit by the window and read. He loved to read. Books about faraway places he would never visit. Stories about adventures he would never have. Tales of heroes and villains and great battles and true love. He would lose himself in these stories, and for a little while he would be someone else. Somewhere else. But then he would close the book, look out at the square, at his village, at his life, and he would feel grateful. Grateful that he didn't have to be a hero. Grateful that he didn't have to have grand adventures. Grateful that he could just be Cappuccino, living his simple, peaceful life. In the evenings, after the cafe closed, after Signor Espressini had counted the day's earnings and locked up, the register, after the tables had been wiped down and the floors had been swept, Cappuccino would walk home slowly. He would take the long way, around the square, past the fountain, down the narrow street where Signora Biscotti lived, past the church with its ancient bells, past the small park where children played. He would take his time, in no hurry to get anywhere, just enjoying the evening air, the sounds of the village settling down for the night, the warm glow of lights in windows, the smell of dinners being cooked, the sound of families gathering together. And when he finally made it home, to his little apartment above the bakery, he would sit by his window and look out at the stars, the same stars that had shone over this village for thousands of years, the same stars that would shine over it for thousands more. He would make himself a small cup of tea, and he would sit there, and he would think about his day, about the people he had served, about the conversations he had overheard, about the small kindnesses he had witnessed, about how lucky he was to be part of this community, this village, this life. This was his routine, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it never got boring. It never got old. Because every day was different in small ways. Every day brought new conversations, new faces, new moments. And Cappuccino appreciated every single one of them. He had friends in the village. Lots of them. There was Antonio, a gelato cone who ran the ice cream shop next to the cafe. They would often have lunch together, sitting on a bench by the fountain, sharing stories about their customers. There was Maria, a small espresso cup who worked at the library. She would come to the cafe every afternoon at 3 o'clock, always ordering the same thing, a cappuccino with extra foam. They would talk about books, about stories, about life. There was Giuseppe, an old coffee pot who had retired years ago but still came to the cafe every morning to read the newspaper and complain about how things used to be better in the old days. These were Cappuccino's people, his community, his family in a way. They knew him. They cared about him. They would notice if he didn't show up one day. They would check on him if he seemed sad. They would celebrate with him when something good happened. This was what mattered, not grand adventures or heroic deeds, but connection, community, belonging. Cappuccino had never been in love. He was 25 years old, which was young for a coffee cup, and he had simply never met anyone who made his coffee warm, who made his lid feel tight, who made him want to be more than just friends. He had watched his friends fall in love, get married, start families, and he was happy for them, genuinely happy. But he had never felt that pull himself, never felt that spark, never felt like there was someone out there who was meant for him. He was okay with that, or at least he told himself he was okay with that. He had his work, he had his friends, he had his books and his walks and his little apartment with a view of the square. That was enough. That had to be enough. But then, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning. Cappuccino remembers this very clearly, very specifically, because Tuesdays were always the slowest day of the week at Cafe Sole. Mondays were busy because people needed their coffee after the weekend. Wednesdays were busy because it was the middle of the week and people needed motivation to get through it. Fridays were busy because people were celebrating the coming weekend. But Tuesdays? Tuesdays were quiet, peaceful. A day when Cappuccino could take his time, could really focus on making each drink perfect, could have long conversations with the few customers who did come in. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning. The sun was shining through the cafe window, creating patterns of light and shadow on the floor. Signor Espressini was in the back, doing inventory. The old men had already had their morning argument and left. The cafe was empty except for Cappuccino, who was wiping down the counter, humming a little tune to himself, thinking about nothing in particular. And then the door opened. Cappuccino looked up, ready to greet the customer with his usual warm smile and cheerful "Buongiorno." But the words died in his throat. His coffee, which had been at a comfortable room temperature, suddenly felt hot. Very hot. Almost burning. His hands, which had been steady wiping the counter, began to shake. His lid felt loose, like it might fall off. His vision seemed to narrow, focusing entirely on the being who had just walked through the door. She was a ballerina. But not just any ballerina. She was the most beautiful, the most graceful, the most perfect being that Cappuccino had ever seen in his entire life. Her head was a cappuccino cup just like his, the same shape, the same general design. But where his was simple and plain, hers was elegant, sophisticated, clearly made by a master craftsman. There were delicate patterns painted around her rim, swirls of gold and silver that caught the light. Her cup was a pristine white, so clean it seemed to glow. She wore a pink tutu that seemed to float around her like a cloud, like it wasn't made of fabric at all, but of something lighter, something magical. The tutu was multiple layers of the finest tulle, each layer a slightly different shade of pink, creating a gradient effect that was absolutely mesmerizing. It moved with her as she walked, swaying gently, catching the light, looking like flower petals or butterfly wings or something equally delicate and beautiful. Her movements were graceful in a way that seemed impossible. Every step she took was perfectly placed, perfectly balanced, like she was dancing even when she was just walking. Her arms moved with a fluid elegance, her hands positioned just so, her fingers extended in that particular way that only trained dancers can achieve. Even her posture was perfect. Back straight, shoulders back, head held high, but not in an arrogant way, in a confident way, in a way that said she knew exactly who she was and she was comfortable in her own skin, or in this case, her own porcelain. When she looked around the cafe, her eyes were gentle, kind, curious. They were a warm brown color like fresh coffee beans, and they had a depth to them that suggested intelligence, sensitivity, thoughtfulness. These were eyes that had seen things, had experienced things, had felt things, but they weren't sad. They were just knowing, wise beyond their years. And then those eyes landed on Cappuccino, and the world stopped. Time itself seemed to freeze in that moment. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed to pause mid-beam. The dust motes floating in the air seemed to hang suspended. The sound of the fountain outside seemed to fade away. Everything in the entire universe seemed to narrow down to this moment, this exact moment, when their eyes met. Cappuccino felt something he had never felt before. His coffee inside him, which was normally just there, just existing, suddenly seemed to warm up. Not in a painful way, but in a pleasant way. Like someone had turned on a heater inside his chest. It started to bubble, to fizz, to move in swirling patterns. He felt something rise up from his coffee, up through his body, into his head, making him feel lightheaded, dizzy, confused, but in the most wonderful way possible. He felt an overwhelming urge to smile, and he realized he already was smiling. The biggest, dopiest smile he had ever smiled in his life. He felt an overwhelming urge to say something, anything, to make her keep looking at him. But his voice seemed to have stopped working. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a small puff of steam. The ballerina smiled, a small, gentle smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. And that smile was like the sun breaking through clouds after a week of rain. It was like the first sip of coffee on a cold winter morning. It was like coming home after a long journey. It was everything. It was absolutely everything. She walked toward the counter. Each step was poetry. Each movement was art. Cappuccino watched her approach, and he felt like his coffee was going to overflow, was going to burst right out of his cup because he couldn't contain what he was feeling. He didn't even know what he was feeling. He had no name for it, no frame of reference. Nothing in his 25 years of life had prepared him for this moment. She reached the counter. She was close now. So close he could smell her. She smelled like vanilla and cinnamon and something floral that he couldn't quite identify. She smelled like early morning and fresh flowers and possibility. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice. Oh, her voice. It was soft, gentle, like foam on espresso, like silk, like music. It had a slight accent that he couldn't quite place. Northern Italy, maybe? Milan? Turin? Somewhere sophisticated, somewhere cosmopolitan, somewhere far from this tiny village. Each word she spoke seemed to float in the air for a moment before fading away. And Cappuccino wanted to grab those words, to hold on to them, to keep them forever. "I'm new to the village," she continued, and Cappuccino realized he had been staring at her, mouth slightly open, saying nothing. "Could you recommend a good coffee?" Coffee. She wanted coffee. That was good. He made coffee. That was literally his job. He could do this. He just needed to speak. Just needed to form words with his mouth. Just needed to make sounds come out. He tried to speak, his mouth opened, but at first, nothing came out. Well, not nothing. Steam came out. Just steam. A little puff of embarrassed, confused steam that rose up and dissipated in the air above him. He was nervous. So incredibly nervous. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the counter to keep them still. His lid was rattling on his head. He felt like he was going to fall apart, like his cardboard body was going to just collapse into a flat shape on the floor. "Get it together," he told himself. "She's just a customer. Just another customer. You serve customers all day, every day. This is no different." Except it was different. It was completely different. This wasn't just another customer. This was, well, he didn't know what this was. But it definitely wasn't just another customer. He started, then stopped. His voice came out as a squeak. He cleared his throat, which made a gurgling sound as the coffee inside him sloshed around. "I could make you one," he finally managed to say, and he was relieved that at least the words came out sounding relatively normal. "My specialty is, well, cappuccino." As soon as he said it, he wanted to slap himself. His specialty is cappuccino, of course it is. He's literally a cappuccino cup. That's the most obvious, stupidest thing he could have said. She probably thinks he's an idiot now. She probably thinks he's the dumbest coffee cup she's ever met. She's probably going to turn around and walk out, and he'll never see her again, and he'll spend the rest of his life regretting this moment. But she didn't turn around. She didn't laugh at him. She didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she smiled. And oh, that smile. That smile was even better than the first one. This one reached her eyes, made them sparkle, made her whole face light up in a way that was absolutely radiant. "Then I'll have one," she said. Her voice was warm, encouraging, kind. "Made by you. Made by you." Those three words echoed in Cappuccino's head. Made by you. She wanted him specifically to make it. Not just any coffee. His coffee. A cappuccino made by Cappuccino for this beautiful, graceful, perfect ballerina. "Of course," he said, and he was proud of how steady his voice sounded. "One cappuccino coming right up. Please have a seat. I'll bring it to you." She thanked him and glided over to a table by the window, the one with the best view of the square. She sat down with such grace that it barely looked like she was sitting at all. More like she was floating down, and the chair just happened to be there to catch her. She adjusted her tutu carefully, making sure it was arranged just right, and then she folded her hands on the table and looked out the window. And Cappuccino thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his entire life. He turned to make her drink, and his hands were still shaking. "Focus," he told himself. "This is the most important cappuccino you will ever make in your entire life. Don't mess this up." He selected the best espresso beans from the shelf, not the ones they used for regular customers. The special ones. The ones from a small farm in Sicily that Signor Espressini only brought out for very special occasions. He ground them carefully, measuring the exact amount, making sure the consistency was perfect. He packed the espresso into the portafilter with the right amount of pressure. Not too much, not too little. Just right. He attached it to the machine and pulled the shot, watching the dark, rich espresso flow into the cup below. It looked perfect. The crema on top was thick and golden, with those little bubbles that indicated it had been extracted at exactly the right temperature and pressure. Next, the milk. He poured cold, fresh milk into a metal pitcher. He positioned the steam wand just below the surface and turned it on, creating a gentle whirlpool that would heat the milk evenly and create perfect microfoam. He listened to the sound, that particular hissing sound that told him it was working correctly. He watched the temperature gauge like a hawk, turning it off at exactly 65 degrees Celsius, perfect temperature for cappuccino. He poured the milk slowly, carefully into the cup with the espresso. And as he poured, he created a design. Not just any design. He poured a heart. A perfect heart with symmetrical curves and a beautiful point at the bottom. It was the best latte art he had ever done in his life. He stepped back and looked at his creation. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The best cappuccino he had ever made. If this didn't impress her, nothing would. He placed the cup on a small saucer, added a tiny biscotti on the side, and carried it over to her table. His hands were still shaking slightly, so he had to walk very carefully, very slowly, making sure he didn't spill a single drop. He reached her table and set the cappuccino down in front of her gently. "One cappuccino," he said. "Extra foam, just the way I think you'll like it." She looked down at the cup, at the heart design in the foam. Her eyes widened slightly, and then she looked up at him, and that smile again. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you." "You're welcome," he said. "I hope you enjoy it. If it's not to your liking, I can make you something else. Anything you want. Really. Anything at all." He was rambling. He knew he was rambling, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. She laughed. It was a soft, gentle laugh that sounded like wind chimes. "I'm sure it's perfect." She picked up the cup delicately, brought it to her lips, and took a small sip. Cappuccino watched her, barely breathing, waiting for her reaction. She closed her eyes as she tasted it, set the cup down, slowly, opened her eyes, and looked at him. "It's the best cappuccino I've ever had," she said. And in that moment, Cappuccino fell in love. Completely. Totally. Irrevocably. Head over heels. Can't think about anything else. Want to spend every moment with her in love. "I'm glad," he managed to say. "I'm Cappuccino, by the way." "Cappuccina," she said. "Ballerina Cappuccina." Cappuccina. Even her name was beautiful. "It's nice to meet you, Cappuccina," he said. "It's nice to meet you too, Cappuccino," she replied. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and time seemed to stretch out, to expand, to become something more than just the passing of seconds. "Well," Cappuccino said finally, reluctantly, because he didn't want to leave, but he knew he had to. "I should get back to work. But, please, enjoy your coffee, and if you need anything else, anything at all, just let me know." "I will," she said. "Thank you." He walked back to the counter, but he couldn't stop glancing over at her. She sat there, sipping her cappuccino slowly, looking out the window at the square, and she looked so peaceful, so content, so perfectly at home that it made his heart ache in a way he didn't understand. From that day forward, everything changed. Ballerina Cappuccina came to the cafe every single morning, at exactly 10 o'clock. Like clockwork. Cappuccino would watch the clock from 9:30 onwards, his excitement building, his coffee warming up in anticipation. And then at 10, the door would open, and there she would be, and his world would light up. Every morning, Cappuccino would make her a cappuccino with extra foam, just the way she liked it. And every morning, he would try to make the latte art even better than the day before. Hearts, tulips, swans, roses, each one more intricate than the last. And every morning she would smile at his creation, would compliment his skill, would make him feel like he was the most talented coffee maker in the entire world. And they would talk. Oh, how they would talk. At first it was just small things, the weather, how her morning had been, how business was at the cafe. But gradually, slowly, the conversations deepened. She told him about her dreams of dancing in the great theaters of the world, about how she had trained since she was a tiny espresso cup, just barely big enough to hold a tablespoon of coffee, about how her parents had saved every penny they had to send her to dance school in Milan, about how she had spent years training, hours and hours every single day, perfecting her technique, learning every position, every movement, every way to tell a story without words, to communicate emotion through movement, to make people feel something just by watching her dance. She told him about her first performance when she was just 7 years old, in a small theater in her hometown. How she had been so nervous she thought she would throw up. How she had stood in the wings, shaking, sure she would forget every step the moment she went on stage. But then the music started, and something changed. All the nervousness disappeared, and she danced, and it felt like flying, like she was weightless, like gravity didn't apply to her anymore. And when the performance ended and the audience applauded, she felt something she had never felt before, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense that this right here, this was what she was meant to do. She told him about the struggles too, about how ballet was incredibly difficult, about how she would dance until her feet bled, until her muscles screamed in protest, until she couldn't stand anymore, about how there were days when she would look in the mirror and see only flaws, only mistakes, only failure. About how the competition was fierce, how there were hundreds of talented dancers all vying for the same few spots in the same few companies. About how she had been rejected so many times she had lost count. About how she sometimes wondered if it was worth it, if she should just give up, find something easier, something more stable, something that didn't hurt so much. But then she would get on stage, she told him, and it would all be worth it. Every drop of sweat, every tear, every moment of doubt. Because when she was dancing, when she was truly dancing, not just going through the motions, but really feeling the music, really embodying the character, really telling the story, nothing else mattered. Not the pain, not the rejection, not the uncertainty, just the dance. Just that moment, just that feeling of transcendence. And Cappuccino. He listened to every word like it was the most important thing he had ever heard. He asked questions. He wanted to know everything about her. What her favorite ballet was. What music moved her the most. What she dreamed about when she closed her eyes at night. And she answered every question with thoughtfulness and honesty. And he felt like he was getting to know not just who she was, but who she really was deep down beneath the surface. And he told her about his simple life, about how he found joy in small things, about how he believed that the most important thing in life wasn't fame or fortune or grand achievements, but connection, bringing warmth to others, making someone's day just a little bit better. He told her about his routine, about his walks through the village, about his evenings spent reading by the window, and he was afraid, at first, that she would find it boring. That after hearing about his simple, small life, she would realize he wasn't interesting enough for someone like her, someone who had traveled and trained and dreamed big dreams. But she didn't find it boring. She found it beautiful. She told him that. She said, "You already do that. You bring warmth to people. You brought warmth to me." That was one evening as the sun was setting and the cafe was empty except for the two of them. The golden light was streaming through the window, painting everything in warm tones. Signor Espressini had left early, trusting Cappuccino to close up, and Cappuccino and Cappuccina sat at a table together, not as coffee maker and customer, but as friends. As something more than friends, maybe. As two souls who had found each other in this vast universe and recognized something familiar, something right, something that felt like home. "You bring warmth to me," she said, and the way she looked at him when she said it made his coffee boil, made his heart race, made him feel like he was the most important being in the world. Weeks turned into months. Cappuccino had never been happier in his entire life. He would wake up excited for the day because he knew he would see her. He would go to work with a smile on his face. He would count down the minutes until 10 o'clock. And when she walked through that door, everything else faded away. The other customers, the noise, the worries, everything. There was just her. They started spending time together outside of the cafe. She would come back in the afternoon after her practice, and they would walk through the village together. He would show her his favorite spots, the bench by the fountain where he liked to sit and read, the small park where children played, the old church with its ancient bells. The bakery where he lived, where Signora Biscotti would give them free pastries because she thought they were the cutest couple she had ever seen. They would walk slowly, in no hurry to get anywhere, just enjoying each other's company. They would talk about everything and nothing, about philosophy and coffee beans and whether or not stars had feelings, about childhood memories and future dreams and what makes a life meaningful. And sometimes they wouldn't talk at all. Sometimes they would just walk in comfortable silence, and that was okay too. That was perfect, actually, because they were together, and that was all that mattered. One evening, they were walking through the village square under a sky full of stars. The village was quiet. Most people had gone home for the night. The only sound was the gentle splash of the fountain and the distant chirping of crickets. The air was cool and pleasant. The stars were so bright they almost seemed close enough to touch. Cappuccino stopped walking. His heart was pounding. His coffee was boiling. This was it. This was the moment. He had been thinking about this for weeks, maybe months. He had been too nervous to do it too, afraid of rejection, too worried that he was moving too fast or that she didn't feel the same way. But he couldn't wait anymore. He had to know. He had to ask. "Cappuccina," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She stopped and turned to look at him. The starlight reflected in her eyes, making them shimmer. "Yes." He reached into his small cardboard body, into a pocket he had sewn on the inside specifically for this purpose, and pulled out a ring. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't an expensive diamond or a rare gemstone, just a simple silver band that he had bought from the village jeweler with money he had been saving for months. It was all he could afford, but he had chosen it carefully, spending hours looking at different options, trying to find one that felt right, that felt like her. And this one did. It was simple, but elegant, understated but beautiful, just like her. He held the ring out, his hand shaking so badly the ring was almost vibrating. "Cappuccina, I know I'm just a simple coffee cup. I know I don't have much to offer. I know you're destined for stages and spotlights and standing ovations. I know you could have anyone, could go anywhere, could do anything, but would you consider spending your life with someone as simple as me? Would you marry me?" There was a moment of silence, a moment that felt like it lasted forever, a moment where Cappuccino's entire future hung in the balance, a moment where he could barely breathe because he was so terrified of what she might say. Ballerina Cappuccina looked at the ring. Then she looked at him, and tears began to roll down from her cup-shaped face. Actual tears. Little drops of coffee, because that's what coffee cups cry. Rolling down her white porcelain, catching the starlight, looking like diamonds. For a horrible second, Cappuccino thought they were sad tears, thought he had made a terrible mistake, thought she was going to say no, going to tell him she liked him but not like that, going to walk away and leave him alone with his broken heart. But then she spoke. "Yes," she whispered. Her voice was choked with emotion. 1,000 times yes. 1,000,000 times yes. Because you're not simple, Cappuccino. You're everything. You're kind and thoughtful, and you make the world better just by being in it. You see beauty in small things. You care about people. You make me feel safe and happy and understood. You're not simple. You're extraordinary. And I love you. I love you so much it hurts." Cappuccino's hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the ring. You love me?" "I love you," she said again, more firmly this time. "I've loved you since that first morning. Since you made me that cappuccino with the heart in the foam. Since you looked at me like I was the most important thing in the world. Since you listened to my dreams like they mattered. I love you, Cappuccino. And I would be honored to spend my life with you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and then they embraced. They held each other tight, 2 coffee cups under a sky full of stars, crying tears of joy, feeling like they were the only 2 beings in the entire universe. "I love you too," Cappuccino whispered into her ear. "I love you more than anything, more than this village, more than my work, more than my own life. You're my everything, Cappuccina. You're my whole world." They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, not wanting the moment to end, wanting to freeze time right there and live in that perfect moment forever. But of course, time doesn't stop. It keeps moving forward, always forward, bringing new moments, new memories, new joys, and eventually, inevitably, new sorrows. But that night, they didn't think about that. They just thought about each other, about their love, about their future together. They were married 3 months later in the village church. Everyone attended. It seemed like the entire village had turned out for the wedding. The old men from the cafe served as witnesses, dressed in their best suits, looking proud and happy. The children threw flower petals, laughing and running and making the whole event feel joyful and light. Signora Espressini closed the cafe for the day so everyone could attend. Signora Biscotti made the wedding cake, a 3-tiered masterpiece that everyone said was the best cake they had ever tasted. The priest blessed them with holy water that tasted slightly of espresso, which everyone agreed was perfectly appropriate for 2 coffee cups getting married. He spoke about love and commitment and partnership, about how marriage wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it, about how love was a choice you made every day, not just a feeling that happened to you. Cappuccina wore a beautiful white wedding dress made of lace and tulle that made her look like a princess. Cappuccino wore a simple black tuxedo that made him feel more handsome than he ever had in his life. They exchanged vows, promising to love each other in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death did them part. And when the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Cappuccino leaned in and kissed her, and the entire church erupted in applause and cheers, and he felt like his heart might actually explode from happiness. The reception was held in the village square. Tables had been set up around the fountain, strings of lights had been hung from the trees, music played from speakers someone had set up. There was food and drink and laughter and dancing. And that night, as the moon rose high in the sky, Cappuccino and Cappuccina danced together in the village square, just the 2 of them, while everyone else watched and smiled. She taught him the steps, guiding him gently, laughing when he stumbled, telling him he was doing great, even though they both knew he was terrible. But it didn't matter. They were together. They were married. They were in love. As they danced, Cappuccino whispered, "I will protect you. Always. No matter what. I will keep you safe. I will make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. I promise. And I will dance for you," she whispered back, her head resting on his shoulder. "Every day, for the rest of our lives, I will bring you joy and beauty and love. I promise. Promises." Beautiful promises made under the stars by 2 souls who meant every word. 2 souls who believed, truly believed, that their love could conquer anything, could withstand anything, could last forever. And for a while, it did. They moved into a small house on the edge of the village. It was tiny, barely big enough for the 2 of them, but it was theirs. It had a tiny kitchen where Cappuccino would make breakfast while Cappuccino made the coffee. It had a bedroom with a window that faced east so they could wake up to the sunrise every morning. And it had a garden, a small garden with soft grass and a few flowers, where Cappuccino would practice her ballet every morning while Cappuccino made breakfast and watched her through the kitchen window, marveling at how graceful she was, how lucky he was, how perfect life had become. Life was perfect. Truly, genuinely perfect in a way that Cappuccino had never imagined was possible. He would wake up next to her every morning. They would make breakfast together, talking and laughing and sometimes just being quiet together. They would walk to the cafe together, holding hands, taking the long way so they could spend more time together. She would have her morning coffee, which he always made special for her. Always tried to make the best cappuccino he had ever made because she deserved the best. Then she would go to her dance studio to practice, and he would work at the cafe, and they would both spend the day looking forward to the evening when they would be together again. In the evenings, they would make dinner together. Neither of them were particularly good cooks, but they tried, and they laughed at their failures, and sometimes they would just give up and go to Antonio's gelato shop instead. They would eat gelato and walk through the village and talk about their days and make plans for the future. They talked about traveling, about going to Rome so Cappuccina could audition for the opera house there, about visiting Venice and riding in a gondola, about maybe even going to Paris someday to see the ballet at the Opera Garnier. They talked about having children someday, about what kind of parents they would be, about what they would name their kids, about how they would raise them with love and kindness and an appreciation for the simple beauties of life. They talked about growing old together, about sitting on a bench by the fountain when they were old coffee cups, watching the world go by, still holding hands, still in love after 50 or 60 or 70 years of marriage, about having grandchildren who would visit them and listen to their stories about the old days, about dying together, peacefully in their sleep so that neither of them would have to live without the other. These were the dreams they shared, the life they planned, the future they believed in. For 2 years, they lived in bliss. 2 years of waking up next to each other. 2 years of laughter and love and small, perfect moments. 2 years of dancing in the kitchen and walking through the village and sitting by the fountain. 2 years of being happy in a way that made them feel like the luckiest beings in the entire world. And then one morning, Cappuccina woke up feeling different. She couldn't quite explain it. She just felt different, like something had changed inside her, like her body was trying to tell her something important. "Cappuccino," she said, shaking him gently awake. Her voice was filled with wonder and excitement and just a touch of fear. "Cappuccino, wake up. I think we're going to be parents." Cappuccino opened his eyes slowly, still half asleep. "What? Parents?" "Yes," she said, placing her hand on her cup-shaped belly. "I can feel them. Growing inside me. 2 little coffee beans. Can you feel them?" Cappuccino sat up quickly, suddenly wide awake. He placed his hand where hers was, and for a moment he felt nothing. But then there it was. So faint, he almost missed it. 2 tiny heartbeats. 2 little lives. Their children. Their babies. His hands started to shake. His coffee started to heat up. Tears began to form in his eyes. "We're going to be parents," he whispered. "We're going to have babies. We're going to be a family." "We're going to be a family," she repeated. And she was crying too, happy tears streaming down her face. They held each other and cried and laughed and couldn't believe it was real. They were going to be parents. This beautiful, miraculous, terrifying, wonderful thing was actually happening to them. Over the next 9 months, they prepared. They turned the small storage room in their house into a nursery. They painted it yellow, a warm, sunny yellow that would make the babies feel happy and safe. They bought 2 tiny cribs that they put side by side so the babies could be close to each other. They bought tiny blankets and tiny clothes and tiny toys. They read books about parenting. They talked to their friends who had children, asking for advice, trying to learn everything they could. Cappuccina's belly grew larger and larger as the months passed. She had to stop dancing after the 5th month because she couldn't maintain her balance anymore. She missed it terribly, missed the feeling of moving to music, missed the freedom of dance. But every time she felt sad about it, she would feel the babies move inside her, and all the sadness would disappear, replaced by excitement and anticipation and love. Cappuccino was attentive, caring, constantly worried. He made sure she had everything she needed. He made her special teas that were supposed to be good for pregnant coffee cups. He rubbed her feet when they were sore. He stayed up with her on the nights when she couldn't sleep because the babies were kicking too much. He told her every single day how beautiful she was, how strong she was, how amazing she was. And he meant every word. 9 months later, on a warm spring evening when the air smelled like flowers and fresh rain, when the sunset was painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and purple, 2 coffee beans were born. The labor was long and difficult. Cappuccina screamed and cried and squeezed Cappuccino's hand so hard he thought his cardboard might crumple. But he stayed with her through all of it, wiping her forehead, telling her she was doing great, telling her he loved her, telling her it would all be worth it soon. And it was. When the first baby came out, tiny and perfect, and screaming at the top of his little bean lungs, Cappuccino cried harder than he had ever cried in his life. The midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket and handed him to Cappuccino, and he looked down at this tiny, perfect little coffee bean, and he felt a love so overwhelming it was almost painful. This was his son, his baby, a being he had helped create, who was part him and part Cappuccina, who was a whole new person, with a whole new life ahead of him. 10 minutes later, the second baby came. Just as tiny, just as perfect, just as loud. The midwife repeated the process, and then Cappuccino was holding one baby, and Cappuccino was holding the other, and they were looking at each other with tears streaming down their faces and smiles that wouldn't stop. "Look what we made," Cappuccino whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Look at them. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect." "They're ours," Cappuccino whispered back, exhausted but happier than she had ever been in her life. "Our little coffee beans. Our babies." They spent that first night just holding them, barely sleeping, too excited and overwhelmed and in love to close their eyes. They counted tiny fingers and tiny toes. They marveled at how small they were, how delicate, how perfect. They tried to decide which one looked more like Cappuccino and which one looked more like Cappuccina. They whispered promises to them, told them how loved they were, told them how their lives would be filled with happiness and safety and all the good things in the world. The first one they named Espresso. He was energetic even from the very beginning, always moving, always kicking his little legs, always making noise, always curious about everything around him. His eyes were bright and alert, always looking around, taking everything in. He was going to be a handful, they could already tell, but a good handful, an exciting handful. The second one they named Latte. He was calmer, gentler, quieter, but with a smile that could light up the darkest room. When he looked at you, really looked at you with those big brown eyes, you felt seen, felt understood, felt loved. He was going to be sensitive, empathetic, kind. Two different personalities, even from day one, but both perfect, both loved beyond measure. The years that followed were the happiest of Cappuccino's life, happier even than the early days of his marriage, because now his family was complete. Now he had everything he had ever wanted, and things he hadn't even known to want. He would wake up early before the sun, unable to stay asleep because he was too excited to check on the boys. He would tiptoe into their room and stand there watching them sleep. They slept in their tiny coffee bean-shaped beds, side by side, always reaching for each other, even in sleep. Sometimes they would hold hands across the small gap between their beds. Sometimes one would climb into the other's bed, and they would sleep curled up together like little question marks. Cappuccino would stand there and watch them breathe, would listen to their tiny snores, would feel his heart swell with so much love he thought it might actually burst. These were his sons, his babies, the most important things in his entire world. And he would stand there and make silent promises to them. Promises to protect them, to keep them safe, to give them the best life possible, to never let anything bad happen to them. Ever. Espresso was the first to walk. At 8 months, he pulled himself up on the side of his bed, wobbled for a moment, and then took his first step. He stumbled and rolled more than walked, really, his little bean body not quite coordinated enough for proper walking yet. But he never gave up. He would fall, land on his tiny bottom, laugh, and try again. That was Espresso. Fearless, determined, always trying, always moving forward, never discouraged by failure. Latte was the first to talk. At 10 months, while Cappuccino was making breakfast, Latte looked up at him and said, "Clear as day. Dada." Just that one word. But it was the most beautiful word Cappuccino had ever heard. He had been Papa to someone. Someone had called him Dada. Someone loved him enough to make him their first word. Cappuccino dropped the coffee pot he was holding. It shattered on the floor, spilling coffee everywhere, but he didn't care. He scooped Latte up and spun him around and cried tears of joy and kissed his little bean head over and over again. As they grew, their personalities became even more distinct. Espresso was loud and energetic and always getting into trouble. He would climb on furniture. He would run when he should walk. He would touch things he shouldn't touch and go places he shouldn't go and ask questions constantly. Why? 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 Was his favorite word. He needed to understand everything, to explore everything, to experience everything. Latte was quieter, more thoughtful, more careful. He would sit and observe before joining in. He would think before he spoke. He was sensitive to other people's feelings, would cry if someone else was sad, would try to comfort anyone who was hurt. He was the peacekeeper, the gentle one, the one who wanted everyone to be happy. But despite their differences, they were inseparable, best friends from the very beginning. They did everything together, played together, ate together, slept together. Wherever one went, the other followed. If you saw Espresso, Latte was usually right behind him. If you saw Latte, Espresso was probably pulling him along on some new adventure. On weekends, they would all go to the village football field. It became their family tradition. Every Saturday morning, without fail, they would pack a small bag with snacks and water, and they would walk to the field together. And the boys would play football while Cappuccino and Cappuccina sat on the grass and watched. The boys loved football. They weren't very good at it, of course. Coffee beans aren't exactly built for sports. They were round and small and not particularly coordinated. But they loved it anyway. They loved running around, chasing the ball, laughing, falling, getting back up, trying again. Espresso played goalkeeper. It was a hilarious choice, really, because he was so small he could barely cover a fraction of the goal. But he was fearless. He would dive for every ball, no matter how impossible to save. He would throw his tiny bean body in front of the ball, not caring if he got hit, not caring if he got hurt. He just wanted to stop that ball, and sometimes, amazingly, he actually did. And when he made a save, his little face would light up with the biggest smile, and he would jump up and down and shout, "Did you see that? Did you see that, Papa?" Latte played striker. He wasn't fast. He couldn't run very well. But he was clever. So clever. He understood the game in a way that Espresso didn't. He would position himself perfectly. He would wait for the perfect moment. And then, when everyone else was busy, he would roll up to the ball and give it a little push, and it would go into the goal. And he would turn around and smile his quiet, gentle smile. Cappuccino and Cappuccina would sit on the grass and watch them play, and they would lean against each other, and she would rest her head on his shoulder, and he would hold her hand, and they would feel content in a way that was almost painful, because it was so perfect, so complete, so exactly right. "We did good," she would say. "We did perfect," he would reply. And it was true. They had created this little family, these two perfect boys, this life full of love and laughter and simple joys. They had done perfect. Every night before bed, the family had a tradition. It was Cappuccina's idea, but it quickly became everyone's favorite part of the day. They would all gather in the living room after dinner, after baths, after the boys had put on their pajamas. Cappuccino would sit in the big chair, the one they had bought specifically because it was big enough for all four of them. Cappuccino would sit next to him, and the boys would climb up and sit on their laps, Espresso on Cappuccino's lap, Latte on Cappuccina's, all of them pressed together, warm and safe and together. And Cappuccina would tell them stories. She was an amazing storyteller. She would make the stories so vivid, so real, that the boys would forget they were sitting in their living room. They would be transported to magical lands, to distant kingdoms, to places where anything was possible. She told them stories about brave coffee cups who fought dragons and won. Stories about princesses who danced so beautifully that the sun would stop to watch them. Stories about families that loved each other so much that nothing, absolutely nothing, could ever tear them apart. No distance, no hardship, no challenge. The love was too strong. The bond was unbreakable. One night, after a particularly exciting story about a coffee cup knight who saved his family from a grinder monster, Espresso asked, "Mama, will we always be together? Will our family always be like this?" It was an innocent question, a child's question, but it made both Cappuccino and Cappuccina pause, made them look at each other, made them think about things they didn't like to think about how nothing lasts forever, about how life is unpredictable, about how happiness, real happiness, is fragile and precious and can be taken away so easily. But they didn't say any of that, because children need to feel safe. Children need to believe that the world is good and that their parents will always protect them and that nothing bad will ever happen. So they both smiled and said at the exact same time, "Always. Nothing will ever separate us." Espresso smiled, satisfied with the answer. He closed his eyes and snuggled deeper into Cappuccino's lap. Latte was already asleep, snoring softly, his little body completely relaxed and trusting. Cappuccino looked down at his sons, at their peaceful faces, at their trust, at their innocence, and he felt something twist in his chest. A premonition, maybe, a fear, a terrible creeping thought that whispered, "What if you can't keep that promise? What if something happens? What if you can't protect them?" He pushed the thought away, refused to entertain it. Nothing was going to happen. Nothing bad was going to happen. He wouldn't let it. He would die before he let anything hurt his family. He had promised to protect them, and he would, no matter what. He carried both boys to their beds, Espresso first, who was heavier and more likely to wake up if left for last, then Latte, who stayed asleep through the transfer, making a small, contented sound as Cappuccino tucked him in. He kissed both their little coffee bean foreheads, lingering for just a moment, breathing in their scent, memorizing this moment, this perfect, peaceful moment. "I love you both," he whispered, "more than all the coffee in all the world. You are my everything, my whole reason for existing. And I will keep you safe. I promise. I promise with every drop of coffee in my body. Nothing will ever hurt you." He stood there for a long moment, just watching them sleep, committing their faces to memory, even though he had seen them every day for years and would see them every day for years to come. Or so he thought. He went back to the living room. Cappuccino was still sitting there, looking out the window at the stars. She had that look on her face, the one she got when she was thinking about something deep, something important. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting down next to her, taking her hand in his. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm thinking about how lucky we are. I'm thinking about how this moment right now is perfect. I'm thinking about how I want to remember this forever. Every detail, the way the room looks, the way you smell, the sound of the boys breathing in the next room. I want to freeze this moment in time and live in it forever." Her words made that fear creep back, that terrible whisper that said, why would she want to freeze this moment unless some part of her knows it won't last? But he pushed it away again. He squeezed her hand. He said, "We'll have thousands more moments like this. Thousands more perfect nights. We have our whole lives ahead of us. This is just the beginning." She squeezed his hand back, turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. Happy tears, he thought. He hoped. "Promise me something," she said. Her voice was serious, intense, in a way that made his coffee cold. "Anything," he said immediately. "Anything at all. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll always protect them, our boys. Promise me you'll keep them safe. Promise me that if something happens to me, you'll take care of them. You'll raise them to be good and kind and happy. Promise me, Cappuccino." His hands started to shake. "Why are you talking like this? Nothing's going to happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to any of us. We're safe here. We're together. We're a family." "I know," she said quickly. "I know. I'm being silly. I'm being paranoid. It's just happiness like this. It scares me sometimes because it feels too good, too perfect, and I keep thinking that something's going to come and take it away." "Nothing's going to take it away," he said firmly. He put his hands on her shoulders, looked her in the eyes. "I won't let it. I promise. I promise with everything I am. I will protect you. I will protect our boys. I will keep our family safe, no matter what, even if it costs me my life. I promise." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, smiled, wiped her tears. Okay. I believe you. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Let's just go to bed. They went to bed. They held each other close, and eventually they fell asleep. But Cappuccino's dreams that night were troubled, dark, filled with shadows and whispers and a feeling of dread that he couldn't shake. He dreamed of the grinder, the terrible machine that took coffee cups and turned them into grounds. He dreamed of losing everything, of being alone, of failing. He woke up in a cold sweat, his coffee freezing inside him. He looked over at Cappuccina. She was sleeping peacefully, her face calm and beautiful in the moonlight. He got out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake her. He went to check on the boys. They were fine, sleeping, safe, innocent. It was just a dream, he told himself. Just a stupid, meaningless dream. Nothing to worry about. Everything is fine. Everything is going to stay fine. But deep down, somewhere in the very bottom of his cup-shaped soul, he knew. He knew that something was coming. Something bad. Something that would test his promise. Something that would change everything. He just didn't know how soon. The next morning started like any other morning. The sun rose. The church bells rang. The smell of fresh bread drifted up from Signora Biscotti's bakery. Cappuccino woke up to the sound of his sons laughing in their room, already awake, already playing, already full of energy even though it was barely past dawn. He smiled. Last night's dream faded. It had been just a dream. Silly to get worked up about it. Everything was fine. He got out of bed, stretched, and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Pancakes. The boys loved pancakes. He would make them pancakes with chocolate chips, their favorite, and they would eat too many and get syrup everywhere, and he would pretend to be annoyed, but really he would be delighted because they were happy and healthy and his. He heard Cappuccina come down the stairs. "Good morning," he called out. "I'm making pancakes." "Perfect," she said, kissing him on the cheek as she passed him. "I have a big day today. I need to practice. The performance is in 3 days." Right. The performance. She had been preparing for months. A theater in Rome had invited her to dance. It was a huge opportunity, the biggest of her career. If she did well, it could lead to more performances, more opportunities, maybe even a permanent position with a major ballet company. She was nervous, but excited, and Cappuccino was so proud of her he could barely contain it. "You're going to be amazing," he said. "They're going to love you." "I hope so," she said, but there was worry in her voice. Doubt. "I know so," he said firmly. "You're the most talented dancer I've ever seen. You're going to dance, and everyone in that theater is going to realize that they're watching something special, something rare, something beautiful." She smiled, kissed him again. "Thank you." I needed to hear that. The boys came tumbling down the stairs, nearly falling over each other in their excitement. "Papa," Espresso shouted, "can we play football today?" "After breakfast," Cappuccino said, "and after your mama practices." "Oh," both boys whined in unison. They ate breakfast together. The boys got syrup everywhere, just like Cappuccino had predicted. They talked and laughed and made plans for the day. It was a perfect morning. A normal morning. The kind of morning they had had hundreds of times before and would have hundreds of times again. Or so they thought. After breakfast, Cappuccino went to the garden to practice. Cappuccino cleaned up the kitchen while the boys played in their room. He washed the dishes, wiped down the counters, swept the floor. Normal domestic tasks that felt satisfying, meditative even. He hummed as he worked, thinking about how lucky he was, how perfect his life was, how nothing could ever change this. And then, around noon, when the sun was high in the sky and the day was warm and beautiful, he heard screaming. Not just any screaming. Cappuccina's screaming. His heart stopped. His coffee went cold. Every instinct in his body started screaming danger, run, hide, fight, protect. He dropped the dish towel he was holding and ran. Ran faster than he had ever run in his life. Out of the kitchen, through the living room, out the back door. toward the garden, toward his wife, toward the sound of her screams. But the boys were already running, had already heard their mother, were already ahead of him, their little legs moving as fast as they could. "Stay here," Cappuccino shouted at them. "Stay inside." But they didn't listen. They were scared. They wanted their mother. So they ran. Cappuccino burst into the garden, and what he saw froze his blood, stopped his heart, shattered his world. There were soldiers. 5 of them. Not regular soldiers. Grinders. He could tell by their uniforms, by the insignia on their chests, by the terrible grinding machines they carried on their backs. The Grinders were a ruthless, evil organization that operated in the shadows of the Italian Brainrot universe. They captured coffee cups and coffee beans and ground them down into coffee grounds that they would sell or use to make more coffee. It was sick. It was wrong. It was murder. But they were powerful, too powerful. And they had been operating for years, taking coffee cups from villages, grinding them down, making them disappear, and no one could stop them. And now they were here, in his garden, and they had Cappuccina. She was struggling, fighting with everything she had, kicking and punching and screaming. But there were too many of them. One was holding her arms. Another was holding her legs. They were dragging her toward a vehicle parked in the street, a black van with no windows. "Cappuccino!" she screamed when she saw him. Her voice was terrified, desperate, broken. "Run! Take the boys and run!" But Cappuccino didn't run. How could he run? This was his wife, the love of his life, the mother of his children. He couldn't just let them take her. He charged forward. He didn't have any weapons. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a coffee cup. A simple coffee cup who made coffee and read books and loved his family. But in that moment, none of that mattered. In that moment, he became something else, something primal, something fierce. He became rage. He became desperation. He became every ounce of love he had for her turned into violence. He punched the nearest grinder in the face. The soldier stumbled back, surprised. Cappuccino tackled him to the ground, hitting him over and over, not caring about technique or strategy, just needing to hurt him, needing to stop him. But then arms grabbed him from behind. Strong arms, military arms. They pulled him off. He struggled, fought, kicked. But there were too many. 2 of them held him. They were stronger than him. Trained. He couldn't break free. "No!" he screamed. "Let me go. Let her go. Please. Take me instead. Take me. Just let her go." But they didn't listen. They just held him tighter, made him watch, made him see them dragging his wife toward the van, and then he heard it. The worst sound he had ever heard in his entire life. Small voices. Children's voices. "Papa? Mama? Espresso and Latte." They had followed him. They were standing at the edge of the garden, holding hands, looking at the scene in front of them with wide, terrified eyes. "No!" Cappuccino screamed. "Go inside. Run. Hide." But it was too late. One of the grinders saw them, pointed, said something to the others, and 2 of them broke away from the group, started walking toward the boys. "No!" Cappuccino screamed. He fought harder than he ever had in his life. He twisted and kicked and bit and did everything he could to break free. But the soldiers holding him were too strong. "Don't touch them. They're just children. They're innocent. Please." The boys started to run. Espresso grabbed Latte's hand and pulled him. "Run!" he shouted at his brother. "Run!" But they were so small. Their legs were so short. The grinders caught them easily, grabbed them. One grinder held Espresso, who was kicking and screaming and fighting. Another held Latte, who was just crying, too scared to even struggle. "Papa!" Espresso screamed. "Papa! Help us!" And Cappuccino couldn't. He couldn't help them. He couldn't save them. He could only watch, held by the soldiers, completely powerless, as they threw his sons into the van next to his wife. "Please," Cappuccino begged. His voice was broken. Tears were streaming down his face. "Please don't do this. I'll do anything. Anything you want. Just let them go. Take me. Kill me. Grind me. I don't care. Just please, please don't hurt my family. One of the grinders walked up to him, looked him in the eyes, and smiled. It was a cruel smile, a smile that had no empathy, no humanity, no soul. Sorry, the grinder said, not sounding sorry at all. Orders are orders. We have a quota to fill. Your family just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then he punched Cappuccino in the face, hard. So hard that Cappuccino's vision went black for a moment, and when it cleared, the soldiers were letting him go. They were walking away, getting into the van. Cappuccino tried to get up, tried to chase them, but his body wouldn't cooperate. He had been beaten too badly. His cardboard body was dented and crumpled. His coffee was spilling out from cracks. He could only crawl, slowly, painfully, toward the van. "Wait," he gasped. "Please, wait. Don't take them. Don't." But the van doors slammed shut. The engine started, and it drove away. Cappuccino watched it go, watched it disappear down the street, taking his family with it, taking everything, and he collapsed in the dirt. He lay there, in the garden, in the dirt where Cappuccino had danced just that morning, in the place where his sons had played. And he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. His family was gone. All of them. Taken. Captured by grinders who were going to grind them down into coffee grounds, into nothing, into death. And he had been powerless to stop it, had failed to protect them, had broken his promise. The promise he had made just last night. The promise to keep them safe no matter what. He had failed. Time passed. He didn't know how much. Minutes, hours, days. It all blurred together. He just lay there, bleeding coffee, staring at nothing, feeling nothing except a pain so deep, so profound, that it didn't even register as pain anymore. It was just emptiness, void, the complete and total absence of everything that had made life worth living. Eventually, someone found him. Signor Espressini, the old espresso cup, had come looking for him when he didn't show up for work. He saw Cappuccino lying in the garden, saw the blood, saw the destruction, and he understood immediately what had happened. Because this wasn't the first time. The grinders had struck before, had taken people from the village before. Everyone knew about them, everyone feared them, but no one could stop them. Signor Espressini called for help, got some neighbors. They carried Cappuccino inside, patched up his wounds, tried to get him to drink something, to eat something, to say something. But Cappuccino didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't drink. He just lay there, staring at nothing, not caring if he lived or died. Preferring death, actually, because what was the point of living without them? Without his wife? Without his sons? What was the point of anything? Days passed. A week, he stayed in bed, didn't move, didn't respond when people spoke to him. Friends came to visit, brought food, offered condolences, told him they were sorry, told him if there was anything they could do, anything at all, he just had to ask. But there was nothing they could do, nothing anyone could do. His family was gone, and nothing could bring them back. On the third day, a messenger arrived at the house, a different grinder, not one of the ones who had taken his family. He carried a small wooden box. He placed it on the table next to Cappuccino's bed, and he left without saying a word. Cappuccino stared at the box for hours before he finally found the strength to open it. Inside was a note, handwritten, cruel, mocking. Your wife was ground yesterday morning. She tasted delicious, high quality. We'll get a good price for her. And beneath the note, in a small plastic bag, was a pile of coffee grounds, finely ground, still slightly warm. All that remained of Ballerina Cappuccina, the beautiful dancer who had loved him, who had married him, who had given him 2 sons, who had promised to dance for him every day for the rest of her life, reduced to grounds, to nothing, to a commodity to be sold. Cappuccino didn't cry when he read the note. He didn't scream. He didn't break down. He couldn't. He had no tears left, no voice left, no emotions left. He was empty, completely and totally empty. He simply sat there staring at the bag of coffee grounds, feeling something inside him crack. Not his cup, though that was cracking too, literal fissures spreading across his cardboard body from the stress and the trauma, but something deeper. His soul, his heart. Whatever it is inside a being that makes them who they are, that part of him cracked, shattered, broke into a million pieces that could never be put back together. He took the bag of coffee grounds. He went to the garden, to the spot where she used to dance every morning, where the grass was slightly worn down from her feet, from her practice, from her dedication to her art, and he buried her there. Dug a small hole with his hands, placed the bag in the ground, covered it with dirt, smoothed it over, placed a single stone on top to mark the spot. He didn't have a funeral, didn't invite anyone. It was just him, alone with what was left of his wife, saying goodbye to the love of his life. He knelt there in the dirt, and he whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect you. I promised I would keep you safe, and I failed. I failed you, Cappuccina, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Never." The wind blew gently through the garden. The flowers swayed. The sun shone down warm and bright, completely indifferent to his pain. "I'll find them," he whispered. "Our boys. I'll get them back. I'll save them. I promise. I promise you, Cappuccina. I will not fail them like I failed you." But even as he said the words, he knew they might be a lie, knew that the boys might already be dead, might already have been ground like their mother, knew that even if they were still alive, he had no idea where they were, no way to find them, no way to save them. But he had to try, had to do something, had to make his promise mean something. He stood up from the grave, walked back into the house, and he started planning. But where do you even begin? He had no weapons, no training, no way to fight against an entire organization of trained soldiers. He was just a coffee cup, a simple broken coffee cup who had lost everything. And then a thought occurred to him, a terrible, dark thought that whispered from the broken places inside him. If you want to save them, you need to become something else, something stronger, something dangerous, something they can't ignore, something they fear. You need to become a weapon. And he knew in that moment what he had to do. It was dark. It was wrong. It went against everything he had ever believed about who he was, about who he wanted to be. But it was the only way. He would go to the mountains, to the Temple of the Black Espresso, the place where coffee cups went to become assassins, where they learned to kill, to fight, to become nightmares. He would train. He would learn. He would transform himself from a gentle coffee cup into something lethal. And then he would come back. He would find the grinders, and he would make them pay. Every single one of them. He would kill them all. And then he would find his sons. If they were still alive, he would save them. And if they weren't, then at least he would avenge them, would make sure that the people who killed them suffered, would make sure that they died screaming, just like he was screaming inside every moment of every day. It wasn't justice. It wasn't right. It was revenge. Pure, dark, consuming revenge. But it was all he had left. So 3 days later, before the sun rose, Cappuccino left the village. He left his little house, left his job at the cafe, left the life he had built, left the person he had been. He told no one where he was going, left no note, just disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, heading toward the mountains, toward the temple, toward a future that he knew would destroy whatever was left of his soul. But he didn't care. His soul was already destroyed. His life was already over. He was already dead inside. He was just waiting for his body to catch up. The journey to the Temple of the Black Espresso took 5 days. 5 days of walking through forests and over mountains. 5 days of sleeping on the cold ground, of going hungry because he couldn't bring himself to eat, of pushing his broken body to keep moving, even when every part of him wanted to just lie down and give up. But he couldn't give up. Not yet. Not until he had fulfilled his promise. Not until he had saved his sons or avenged them. The temple was hidden, high in the mountains where normal people never went, where the air was thin and cold and the paths were treacherous. It was said that many coffee cups tried to reach the temple and never made it, fell off cliffs or got lost or simply gave up. But Cappuccino made it, because he had nothing left to lose. The temple itself was a massive structure of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It looked like a fortress with high walls and narrow windows and an overwhelming sense of danger and darkness. This was not a place of peace. This was not a place of learning. This was a place where coffee cups came to learn how to deal death. Cappuccino approached the massive iron gates. Before he could knock, they swung open. A small figure stood in the doorway. An old espresso cup no bigger than Cappuccino's hand, with eyes that had seen too much death, too much pain, too much darkness. "Why are you here?" The voice was ancient, creaky, but there was steel in it. "Power. To learn," Cappuccino said. His voice was flat, empty. "To learn how to kill." The old master studied him for a long moment. Those ancient eyes seemed to see right through him, to see the broken soul inside, the grief, the rage, the desperation. "Why do you want to kill?" the master asked. "To protect what I have left," Cappuccino said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. The master nodded slowly. "Killing to protect is still killing. Once you start down this path, you can never go back. You will become something different. Something dark, something that normal people will fear. You will lose whatever remained of your old self. Are you willing to pay that price?" Cappuccino thought about his old self, the simple coffee cup who made cappuccinos and read books and was happy. That person was already dead, had died in the garden when he watched his family being taken. There was nothing left of that person to lose. "I don't care," Cappuccino said. "Teach me." The master stared at him for another long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But know this. The training is brutal. Many do not survive. Those who do are never the same. Pain will be your teacher. Death will be your companion. Darkness will be your home. If you can accept that, then enter." Cappuccino walked through the gates. They closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid shutting, and he thought, "Good, my old life is dead anyway. Let it stay buried." And so the training began. Every morning before sunrise, Cappuccino was woken up by a bucket of ice-cold water being thrown on him. No gentle wake-up call. No gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness. Just shock. Immediate, brutal shock that made his coffee freeze and his body convulse. He would have 5 minutes to get dressed, to get to the training yard, to be ready. If he was late, even by a second, he would be punished. 20 laps around the training yard while carrying heavy stones, 50 push-ups, 100 sit-ups. The punishments varied, but they were always brutal, always designed to push him past his limits, to break him down. Then the training would start, and it would continue, without break, until sunset. 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours of continuous training, combat, strategy, stealth, assassination techniques, philosophy of death, psychology of fear. Every possible aspect of being an assassin was covered. He learned to move without sound, to walk across a floor covered in dry leaves without making them rustle, to breathe so quietly that someone standing next to him wouldn't hear it, to become a shadow, a ghost, something that was there but not there. He learned to strike without warning, to identify weak points in an opponent's body and exploit them, to kill quickly, efficiently, without mercy. One strike to end a life, one movement to stop a heart. He learned weapons, katanas, twin swords that became extensions of his arms. At first, they were impossibly heavy, impossibly awkward. He would drop them, fumble with them, cut himself while trying to use them. But gradually, through endless repetition, through countless hours of practice, they became natural, became part of him. He could draw them without thought, could strike without hesitation, could fight with them as easily as most people walked. He learned stealth kills, how to approach someone from behind without them knowing, how to strangle someone silently, how to use shadows and timing and misdirection to get close to a target who thought they were safe. He learned to endure pain. This was perhaps the hardest part of the training, because the master believed that an assassin who feared pain was an assassin who would hesitate, and hesitation meant death. So every day Cappuccino was subjected to pain, not as punishment, but as training. He would be cut, burned, beaten, and he was expected to continue fighting, continue moving, continue functioning despite the pain. Pain is temporary, the master would say as Cappuccino lay bleeding on the training floor, struggling to breathe, wondering if he would survive. Death is permanent. Which would you rather give your enemies? And Cappuccino would force himself to stand, force himself to continue, because the pain he was feeling now was nothing compared to the pain of losing his family, nothing compared to the pain of knowing they had suffered, had been scared, had called for him, and he hadn't come. This physical pain was almost a relief. At least it was something he could focus on, something that distracted him from the emotional pain that threatened to consume him entirely. The other students, there were about 20 of them, kept their distance from Cappuccino. There was something about him that made them uncomfortable, something in his eyes, a darkness that went deeper than training, deeper than ambition. They looked at him and saw something broken, something barely held together, something that might shatter at any moment and take everyone around him down with it. They weren't wrong. Cappuccino trained harder than anyone else. He was always the first one on the training yard and the last one to leave. When the others were sleeping, he was practicing his strikes. When the others were eating, he was studying strategy. When the others were resting their injured bodies, he was pushing his body even further, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion, ignoring everything except the burning need to become better, stronger, more lethal. The master watched this with approval and concern, in equal measure. Approval because Cappuccino was the most dedicated student he had seen in decades. Concern because that level of obsession, that complete disregard for one's own well-being, usually led to one of two outcomes. The student became an unstoppable killing machine, or they burned out completely, consumed by their own darkness. Time lost all meaning. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Cappuccino stopped counting, stopped caring. There was only training, only the endless cycle of wake, train, collapse, wake, train, collapse. He was beaten, broken. His body bore scars from countless training sessions. His cardboard body, once smooth and pristine, was now covered in patches and repairs. His coffee, once warm and inviting, was now cold and bitter. He looked at himself in the mirror sometimes and barely recognized the being staring back. This wasn't the gentle coffee cup who had made cappuccinos in a small village cafe. This was something else, something hard, something dangerous. One day, during a particularly intense sparring session, something changed. Cappuccino was fighting another student, a large thermos bottle who was known as one of the best fighters in the temple. The thermos had him pinned, was about to land a finishing blow, and Cappuccino was losing. And then, suddenly, without warning, he remembered. He remembered Cappuccino's face, not the bag of coffee grounds, but her real face, her smile, the way she looked at him with love and trust, the way she danced in the garden every morning, graceful and beautiful and alive. He remembered being in the cafe, making her that first cappuccino, drawing a heart in the foam, feeling his coffee warm when she smiled at him. He remembered their wedding, the way she looked in her white dress, the way she had said, "I love you," in front of everyone, the way they had danced under the stars. He remembered holding his sons for the first time, those tiny, perfect coffee beans. The way they had looked up at him with complete trust, complete love, seeing him as their whole world. He remembered espresso's first steps, latte's first word, the boys playing football while he and Cappuccino watched from the grass, the bedtime stories, the laughter, the love, the perfect, beautiful, irreplaceable moments that made up a family, a life, a reason for existing. And then he remembered the last moment, the screaming, the van, their faces as they were taken away, the terror in their eyes, the way they had called for him and he hadn't been able to save them. His vision went red, not literally, but it felt that way. Everything tinted with rage, with grief, with a pain so intense it transcended emotion and became something physical, something that burned hotter than any fire. His coffee started to boil, not just warm up, boil. He could feel it bubbling inside him, could feel it getting hotter and hotter, could feel something inside him changing, transforming, breaking free. His katanas, which had been at his sides, suddenly burst into flames. Black flames, not red or orange or yellow like normal fire. Black, flames that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. Flames that felt cold and hot at the same time. Flames that whispered of death and rage and vengeance. The thermos student backed away, his eyes wide with fear. What? What is that? The master, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. His ancient eyes widened in recognition. The black fire, he whispered. I have only seen this once before, 30 years ago. Your rage, your grief, your pain. It burns so hot that it is manifested physically. The flames are an extension of your broken soul. They are you, Cappuccino. All the darkness inside you, made visible, made tangible, made into a weapon. Cappuccino looked at his flaming katanas. He could feel the heat, but it didn't hurt him. Instead, it felt right. Felt like this was always inside him, waiting to come out. Felt like this was who he truly was now. Not a gentle coffee cup, but fire. Black fire. Consuming fire. Destroying fire. Good, the master said, his voice carrying approval and sadness. This is the sign. Your training is nearly complete, but you must learn to master the fire, to control it. Right now, it controls you, and an assassin who is controlled by rage is an assassin who will die. So Cappuccino trained to control the flames, to summon them at will, to make them burn hotter or cooler, to focus them, to direct them, to use them as a weapon rather than just a manifestation of pain. It took months of meditation and practice and pushing himself to the absolute edge of control. But gradually, he learned. The flames became his. He could call them forth with a thought, could coat his katanas in black fire whenever he wanted, could burn with fury or smolder with cold rage depending on what the situation required. 3 years. That's how long Cappuccino trained at the Temple of the Black Espresso. 3 years away from the world. 3 years away from his sons, if they were even still alive. 3 years of nothing but pain and death and learning how to inflict pain and death on others. It should have felt wrong, should have made him question what he was becoming. But it didn't, because every moment of training was motivated by a single thought. I am doing this for them, to save them, to avenge them, to make sure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. He told himself this over and over, made himself believe it, because the alternative, admitting that he was doing this because he wanted to cause pain, because he needed to hurt someone the way he had been hurt, was too dark to contemplate. Finally, the day came, his final test. The master brought him to a room deep in the temple, a room Cappuccino had never been in before. The walls were black stone, absorbing all light. There were no windows. The only illumination came from torches that burned with an eerie green flame. In the center of the room was a chair, and tied to that chair was a grinder soldier, arms bound, legs bound, mouth gagged, eyes wide with fear. This, the master said, is your final test. Not of skill, You have skill, not of strength. You have strength. This is a test of will, of commitment, of crossing the line from student to assassin. This grinder was captured 3 days ago during a raid on a nearby village. He is guilty of many crimes, many murders, many families destroyed. The world will not miss him. Kill him. Prove that you can do what must be done. Prove that you are ready. Cappuccino stared at the soldier. This wasn't one of the ones who had taken his family. He would have remembered that face, but it didn't matter. This was a grinder, part of the organization that had destroyed his life, and more than that, this was a killer. Someone who had done to other families what had been done to his. Someone who deserved death. Still, for a moment, he hesitated, because this was different from training. This was a real person, a living being, about to die by his hand, about to have their life ended because he chose to end it. The old Cappuccino, the one who had worked in a cafe and read books and believed in kindness, that Cappuccino would have said no, would have refused, would have tried to find another way, but that Cappuccino was dead, had died 3 years ago in a garden in a small village. This Cappuccino, the new one, the one forged in pain and rage and endless training, this Cappuccino knew what had to be done. He drew his katanas. They burst into black flames immediately, responding to his will, to his darkness. He walked toward the soldier. The grinder's eyes went even wider. He tried to scream through the gag, tried to struggle against the ropes, but it was useless. "Please," the soldier managed to say, his words muffled but understandable. "I have a family, a wife, children. Please." "I was just following orders. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I had no choice. Please." Cappuccino stopped, looked at the soldier, and he thought about that. About family. About his family. About whether this soldier really had a wife and children, or if he was just lying, trying to save himself. About whether it even mattered. And then he thought about Cappuccina, about espresso, about latte, about his promise. "So did they," Cappuccino said, his voice cold, empty, dead. "All the people you killed, all the coffee cups you ground, they had families too. They had people who loved them. They had futures, dreams, lives that mattered. And you took it all away from them, just following orders, as if that makes it better, as if that absolves you of responsibility." He raised his katana. The black flames burned brighter, hotter. "This is for every family you destroyed," he said. And he struck. The soldier made a choking sound. His eyes went wide, then empty, then closed. His body slumped in the chair, no longer struggling, no longer breathing, no longer alive. Cappuccino stood there, his katana still burning, staring at what he had done. And he felt nothing. No guilt. No remorse. No horror at having taken a life. Just emptiness. Just the cold satisfaction of having completed a task, of having proven himself, of having taken one small step toward his ultimate goal. The master walked up beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your training is complete," he said. "You are no longer who you were. From this day forward, you are Cappuccino Assassino, the coffee cup killer, the black flame of vengeance. You are death in a cardboard cup. You are a weapon. Use it wisely. Use it well. And remember, every kill takes a piece of your soul, even the justified ones. Especially the justified ones. You may start this path believing you are doing right. But the further you walk, the harder it is to remember where right ends and wrong begins." Cappuccino nodded. He understood, or thought he did. But in that moment, he didn't care about souls or morality or right and wrong. He cared about one thing only: finding his sons and destroying everyone who stood in his way. He left the temple the next morning before dawn, carrying his twin katanas and a darkness inside him that would never fully leave. He headed back down the mountain, back toward the world, back toward his mission. He was no longer Cappuccino the coffee cup. He was Cappuccino Assassino, and he had work to do. The journey back to his village took 3 days. 3 days of walking through forests and over mountains. But this time, he wasn't broken and grieving. This time, he was focused, determined, lethal. When he reached the village, it was late evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked like blood and fire. How appropriate, he thought. He went straight to his house, his small house on the edge of the village where he had lived with his family, where he had been happy, where everything had ended. The house looked abandoned. Which made sense. He had been gone for 3 years. No one knew where he had gone. They probably thought he was dead, or had abandoned the village out of grief. The windows were dark. The garden was overgrown. The whole place had an air of sadness and neglect. He opened the door. It creaked. Inside, everything was covered in dust, but otherwise, nothing had changed. The furniture was still where it had been. The photos on the walls still hung in their frames. His son's toys were still scattered on the floor where they had left them that terrible morning 3 years ago. He walked through the house slowly, memories assaulting him from every direction. The kitchen where they had eaten breakfast together. The living room where they had told stories. The bedroom he had shared with Cappuccina. The nursery where his sons had slept. He went to the nursery, pushed open the door. The 2 tiny cribs were still there, side by side, just as they had been. He walked over to them, ran his hand over the rail of one, feeling the smooth wood under his fingers. "Papa will find you," he whispered to the empty room. "If you're still alive, Papa will find you and bring you home. And if you're not, Papa will make them pay. Every single one of them. I promise." He left the nursery, went to the garden, to the spot where he had buried Cappuccina. The stone he had placed was still there, though it was partially covered by grass now. He knelt beside the grave. "I'm back," he said softly. "I'm back, and I'm ready. I'm going to find them, Cappuccina. I'm going to save our boys, and I'm going to destroy the grinders, every single one of them, for you, for Espresso, for Latte, for every family they've ever hurt." The wind blew gently, the flowers swayed, and Cappuccino felt for just a moment like she was there with him, like she heard him, like she approved. He stood up, went back into the house, found his old clothes, his old things. Most of them didn't fit anymore. He had changed physically during the training, was more muscular, more scarred, more damaged. But he found a long black coat that fit well enough. It would do. It would hide his katanas, would let him move through the world without immediately being recognized as an assassin. He left the house, locked the door behind him. He wouldn't be coming back for a while. Maybe never. But that was okay. This wasn't his home anymore. Home was wherever his sons were, and he was going to find them. But first he needed information, needed to know where the grinders operated, where they took their victims, where they might be keeping his sons, if they were still alive. He went to the cafe, Café Sole, his old workplace, where this had all started, where he had met Cappuccina, where he had been happy. Signor Espressini was still there, still working behind the counter, though he looked older, more tired. The cafe was empty except for one old man reading a newspaper in the corner. Cappuccino walked in. The bell above the door chimed, that familiar sound he had heard thousands of times in his old life. Signor Espressini looked up, and his eyes widened in shock. "Cappuccino, is that really you?" "Hello, Signor," Cappuccino said. His voice was different, harder, colder, not the warm, friendly voice of the young coffee cup who had worked here. "I need information." "You've been gone for 3 years," Signor Espressini said, coming out from behind the counter, looking at Cappuccino with a mixture of relief and worry. "We thought you were dead, or that you'd left and would never come back. What happened to you? Where have you been?" "That doesn't matter," Cappuccino said. "What matters is finding my sons. Tell me everything you know about the grinders, where they operate, where they take their victims. Everything. Signor Espressini's face fell. Cappuccino. Your sons. I'm sorry, but they're gone. Everyone who gets taken by the grinders, they don't come back. You need to accept that and try to move on with your life. Cappuccino's hands clenched into fists. His coffee started to heat up. Don't tell me to move on. Don't tell me to accept it. They're my sons. And until I see their bodies, until I know for certain that they're dead, I will never stop looking for them. Now tell me what you know. Something in Cappuccino's eyes, something dark and dangerous, made Signor Espressini take a step back. All right, he said quietly. All right. I'll tell you what I know. And he did. He told Cappuccino about the grinders' operations, about how they had multiple bases across Italy, about how they would raid villages, take coffee cups and coffee beans, bring them to processing centers where they would be ground down and packaged for sale, about how it was a huge operation, very organized, very ruthless, about how many people had tried to stop them over the years, and all had failed, been killed, been ground themselves. There's a base about 50 kilometers from here, Signor Espressini said, an old mill on the edge of the forest. That's where they took your family. That's where they take everyone from this region. But Cappuccino, you can't go there alone. You'll be killed. You need to contact the authorities. Let them handle it. The authorities have had years to handle it, Cappuccino said, and they've done nothing. I'll handle it myself. He turned to leave, but Signor Espressini grabbed his arm. Wait, I want to help. I can't let you do this alone. Let me come with you, or let me gather some people from the village. We can... No, Cappuccino said firmly, pulling his arm free. This is my fight. My burden. I won't risk anyone else. But thank you for everything, for being a good boss, for being kind to me and my family. I'll never forget that. And then he left, walked out of the cafe, out of his old life, toward the old mill, toward whatever awaited him there, toward either rescue or revenge. He no longer cared which. The old mill stood alone in the forest, just as Signor Espressini had described. It was a massive structure of stone and wood, old and weathered, with broken windows and a collapsed section of roof. But despite its dilapidated appearance, it was clearly being used. There were lights inside, vehicles parked outside, guards patrolling the perimeter. Cappuccino watched from the trees, hidden in shadows, observing, planning. He counted 6 guards outside, probably more inside, all armed, all trained, all dangerous. The old Cappuccino would have been terrified, would have turned around and run, would have called for help. But Cappuccino Assassino felt nothing except cold calculation. 6 guards outside were 6 obstacles to remove. Nothing more, nothing less. Just problems that needed solving. He waited until nightfall, until the guards were tired, less alert, thinking about when their shift would end rather than watching for threats. And then he moved, silent as a shadow, invisible as the wind. He crossed the open ground between the forest and the mill without making a sound, without being seen. Years of training had made stealth second nature to him. The first guard never knew what hit him. One moment he was standing there, yawning, thinking about dinner. The next moment, Cappuccino was behind him, and a blade was across his throat, and he was falling silently to the ground. The second guard was smoking a cigarette, looking up at the stars, completely unaware. Cappuccino's katana, coated in black flames for just a moment, struck so fast the guard didn't even have time to scream. The third and fourth guards were together, talking quietly. Cappuccino approached from behind. His blades flashed. Both guards fell at the same time, their conversation cut off mid-sentence. The fifth guard was more alert, turned around just as Cappuccino was approaching. His eyes widened. He opened his mouth to shout, but Cappuccino was faster. A throwing star, small and deadly, hit the guard in the throat. He collapsed, gurgling, unable to make a sound. The sixth guard unfortunately saw what happened to the fifth. He shouted an alarm, reaching for his radio. But Cappuccino was already moving, crossing the distance in seconds, his katana swinging. The guard's shout was cut off. The radio fell from his hand, but the damage was done. The alarm had been raised. The mill erupted with activity. Lights turned on. Doors burst open. Soldiers poured out, armed and ready. Good, Cappuccino thought. Let them come. Let them all come. More targets, more grinders to kill, more steps toward revenge. His katanas burst into black flames. He stood there in the open, no longer hiding, no longer sneaking, just standing, waiting. A lone coffee cup assassin against dozens of trained soldiers. "Who are you?" one of the soldiers shouted. "Identify yourself." "I am Cappuccino Assassino," he said, his voice carrying across the night. 3 years ago, you took my family, my wife, my sons. You ground my wife into coffee. You took my children. And now I've come to make you pay. Every single one of you." The soldiers looked at each other. Some laughed, some raised their weapons. They didn't believe this lone coffee cup was a threat. They thought he was crazy, suicidal, doomed. They were wrong. Cappuccino charged. His katanas flashed black fire, and the battle began. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like a dance, like Cappuccino's ballet, but with death instead of art, with blood instead of applause. Cappuccino moved through the soldiers like wind through wheat. His blades cut, his flames burned. His training and rage and grief all combined into something unstoppable, something that could not be reasoned with, could not be bargained with, could not be stopped. Soldiers fell, one after another after another. They shot at him. He dodged. They swung weapons at him. He parried. They tried to surround him. He spun and struck and left bodies in his wake. The black flames on his katanas grew brighter, hotter, feeding on his rage, on his pain, on his need for vengeance. When he struck, the flames would leap from his blades to his. Victims, consuming them, making them scream, making them burn. But he didn't kill them all quickly. Number. That would be too merciful. For some of them, he made it slow, made them suffer, made them feel a fraction of what his family had felt, what he had felt every moment of every day for the past 3 years. "Where are they?" he would ask, as a soldier lay dying. "Where are the coffee beans you took 3 years ago? Where are my sons?" But most of them didn't know, or claimed not to know. And then they would die, and he would move to the next one. The battle lasted hours, or maybe it was minutes. Cappuccino had lost all sense of time. There was only the fight, only the killing, only the endless cycle of strike, kill, move, strike, kill, move. Until finally there were no more soldiers. They were all dead. All of them. The ground was covered in bodies and blood and the smell of burning coffee. Cappuccino stood there, breathing heavily, his katanas still burning, his body covered in wounds that he barely felt. And he looked at what he had done, at the carnage, at the death, and he felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just emptiness, just the hollow knowledge that he had killed dozens of people and it hadn't brought his family back, hadn't filled the void inside him, hadn't made anything better. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He needed to search the mill, needed to find his sons, or find proof that they were dead, needed to know. He walked toward the mill entrance, stepping over bodies, his flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. The door was open, swinging gently in the night breeze. He entered. Inside was darkness and silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy or oppressive, wrong. He lit his katanas brighter, using them as torches, and moved deeper into the mill. He found rooms, many rooms. Some were storage, filled with bags of coffee grounds, packages ready to be shipped and sold. Each bag represented a life ended, a family destroyed. The sheer number of bags was staggering. Hundreds, maybe thousands. All of them had been people once, had been loved, had mattered to someone. He found a processing room, the grinders themselves, massive machines of metal and grinding wheels stained with old coffee, reeking of death. This was where they did it. where they took living, breathing, thinking, feeling beings and reduced them to product, to commodity, to nothing. Cappuccino stood there, looking at the machines, and his flames burned so hot that the metal started to warp from the heat. He wanted to destroy them, wanted to burn the whole mill down. But not yet. Not until he had searched every room. Not until he knew. He found cells. Small rooms with bars where they would keep their victims before processing them. Most were empty, but in one he found 3 coffee beans, huddled together, terrified, clearly recent captives. They looked up at him as he approached, at his burning katanas, at his scarred and dangerous appearance, and they cowered, thinking he was another grinder, another captor, another threat. "I'm not going to hurt you," Cappuccino said, his voice softer than it had been in years. "I'm here to save you." He broke the lock on their cell, opened the door. "Go," he said. "Run. Get out of here. Go home to your families. Tell them what happened here. Tell them the grinders are gone. Tell them they're safe now." The coffee beans didn't need to be told twice. They ran, fled into the night, toward freedom, toward home, toward their families. Cappuccino watched them go and felt a small, tiny flicker of something that might have been satisfaction. He had saved them, at least. 3 lives that wouldn't end in the grinders, 3 families that wouldn't lose someone they loved. But his sons, where were his sons? He searched every room, every corner, every shadow. He found more evidence of the grinders' crimes, more bags of coffee grounds, more cells, more horror. But he didn't find espresso. He didn't find latte. He didn't find any trace of them until he reached the last room, the office, where records were kept, where the operations were coordinated. He found files, hundreds of files, each one representing a victim, names, dates, processing information. Efficient, clinical, horrifying. With shaking hands, he searched through them, looking for familiar names. Please, he thought, please let them be here. Please let me know what happened to them. And then he found it, a file with 2 names, Espresso, Latte. He opened it, read it, and his world shattered all over again. Subjects captured, 3 years ago, Espresso and Latte, coffee beans, ages 3 and 3. Processing date, 3 days after capture. Status, processed, ground, packaged, sold. The file had more details, clinical, horrible details about the processing, about how they had cried for their papa, about how they had been scared, about how they had held each other until the end. And then there was a note at the bottom, in different handwriting. Commander Grindstone kept the packaging for personal use, wanted to keep it as a reminder of the coffee cup assassin case. Cappuccino's hands were shaking so badly the file fell from his fingers. Paper scattered across the floor, and he fell to his knees. They were gone. Really, truly gone. Not kidnapped, not held somewhere, not waiting to be rescued. Gone. Dead. Murdered. Ground into nothing. Turned into coffee that someone somewhere had drunk without knowing, without caring, without ever realizing that they were consuming the remains of 2 innocent children. His sons. His beautiful, perfect, innocent sons. Who had loved him, who had trusted him, who had called for him and he hadn't saved them. A sound came out of Cappuccino then. Not a scream, not a cry. Something more primal. Something that came from the deepest part of his broken soul. A sound of pure anguish, pure rage, pure grief. His flames erupted, not just on his katanas, but all around him. Black flames consumed the office, spreading to the walls, to the ceiling, to every piece of wood and paper and evidence of the grinder's crimes. He stood there as the mill burned around him, as everything burned, and he didn't move, didn't try to escape, didn't care if he burned with it. What was the point? His family was gone, all of them. His wife, ground and buried. His sons, ground and consumed. His reason for living, for fighting, for existing, all gone. There was nothing left, No reason to continue. No reason to leave this burning building. Maybe it would be better to just end it here, to let the flames consume him too, to join his family wherever they were. But then he thought about Commander Grindstone. The note said he was the one who had kept the packaging, the one who had wanted a reminder, the one who had found this amusing somehow, worth remembering. And rage, pure and simple and all-consuming, flooded through Cappuccino again. He couldn't die yet, not here, not now. Not until he had found Grindstone, not until he had made him pay, not until he had killed the person most responsible for his family's death. He walked out of the burning mill. The flames licked at him but didn't burn him. His own black fire protected him, shielded him, made him immune to the heat. He stood outside, watching the mill burn, watching years of the grinder's operations turn to ash. And he made a new promise. Not to his sons. He couldn't promise them anything anymore. They were gone. But to himself, to the darkness inside him. He would find Grindstone. He would hunt down every single person who had been involved in his family's death. And he would make them suffer, make them beg, make them understand what they had taken from him. And after that, it didn't matter. After that, he could die, could let the darkness finally consume him completely, could stop fighting and it just end. But not until Grindstone was dead. The hunt for Grindstone took months. Cappuccino traveled across Italy, tracking down leads, interrogating grinders, following every clue. He became a ghost story, a legend, the black flame assassin who appeared in the night and killed grinders wherever he found them. He didn't hide anymore, didn't try to be subtle. He wanted them to know he was coming, wanted them to be afraid, wanted them to understand that their crimes had consequences, that they couldn't just destroy families and face no repercussions. Every grinder he found, he would ask the same question: where is Commander Grindstone? Most didn't know, or claimed not to know, and they would die. Quickly, if they were honest. Slowly, if they lied. Cappuccino had become an expert at detecting lies, at reading fear, at knowing when someone was hiding something. Slowly, through blood and fire and countless deaths, he pieced together information. Grindstone wasn't just any commander. He was high up in the grinder organization, one of the leaders. And he had multiple bases, multiple operations, multiple layers of security around him. But Cappuccino didn't care about security, didn't care about difficulty. He had nothing to lose, nothing to fear. He was already dead inside. His body just hadn't caught up yet. He tracked Grindstone to a compound in northern Italy. A fortress, really. High walls. Armed guards everywhere. Security cameras. The whole place designed to keep out intruders, to protect the people inside. It should have been impenetrable. Would have been for anyone else. But Cappuccino wasn't anyone else. He was rage given form. Death. Wearing a cardboard cup, he was unstoppable. He infiltrated the compound at night, moving through shadows, avoiding cameras, taking out guards silently. He had done this so many times now, it was second nature. Muscle memory. His body knew how to kill, almost better than it knew how to breathe. He made his way deeper into the compound, following the map he had memorized, heading toward the central building where Grindstone's office was supposed to be. Guards fell behind him, silent and sudden, never getting a chance to raise an alarm. The path he left was marked in bodies and darkness. Finally, he reached the office, third floor, corner room. The door was locked, but that meant nothing to someone with katanas that could cut through steel. He sliced through the lock and pushed the door open. Inside, sitting at a large desk, working late into the night, was Commander Grindstone, a large, imposing coffee mug covered in military armor and medals. He looked up at the sound of the door opening, his hand immediately going to a weapon on his desk. But Cappuccino was faster. He crossed the room in an instant, knocked the weapon away, grabbed Grindstone by the throat, and lifted him off the ground. "Hello, Commander," Cappuccino said, his voice cold as ice. "Remember me?" Grindstone's eyes widened in recognition. The coffee cup from 3 years ago. The one whose family we took. You're alive." "Barely," Cappuccino said. "And you're about to not be." He threw Grindstone across the room. The commander hit the wall hard, denting it, falling to the floor with a groan. "How did you get in here?" Grindstone gasped. "The guards, the security." "Dead," Cappuccino said simply. "All of them. There's no one left to help you, no one to save you. It's just you and me, just the way I wanted it." Grindstone struggled to his feet, reaching for another weapon, a backup pistol hidden in his jacket. But Cappuccino kicked it away before he could aim it. "Please," Grindstone said, and there was fear in his voice now. Real fear. "We can make a deal. I can give you information, money, resources, whatever you want. Just let me live." "I don't want money," Cappuccino said, his katanas bursting into black flames. "I don't want information. I want you to feel what my sons felt. I want you to experience a fraction of the terror they experienced. I want you to know what it's like to be powerless, helpless, at the mercy of someone who has none." He started cutting. Not to kill. Not yet. But to hurt, to wound, to cause pain. Methodically, carefully, making sure Grindstone stayed conscious, stayed aware, felt every moment of it. Grindstone screamed, begged, cried, tried to bargain, tried to fight back, but nothing worked. Cappuccino was relentless, unstoppable, a force of nature driven by grief and rage. Hours passed. Grindstone's screams echoed through the empty office, through the compound. But no one came, because there was no one left to come. Cappuccino had made sure of that. Finally, as dawn began to break, as the first light of morning started to filter through the window, Cappuccino stopped. He stood over Grindstone's broken body, his katanas still burning, his own body exhausted but unwilling to show it. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Cappuccino asked quietly. "The worst part is that killing you won't bring them back. It won't undo what happened. It won't make my pain stop. Revenge is supposed to feel good, supposed to feel like justice. But it doesn't. It just feels empty, hollow, wrong. But I'm going to do it anyway, because I promised, and because you deserve it." "Wait," Grindstone gasped, barely able to speak. "Your sons, the packaging, I kept it. It's in my personal quarters, third drawer of my desk at home. I kept it because I thought it was funny. A reminder. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Cappuccino's flames burned brighter, hotter. "You kept my son's remains as a trophy, as a joke, as something to remember?" "I didn't know," Grindstone whispered. "I didn't know what it would mean. Didn't know you would come back. Didn't know you would become this. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "For Cappuccino," Cappuccino said, raising his katana. "The dancer you had ground." He struck. "For Espresso," he said. "The brave little goalkeeper who never gave up." He struck again. "For Latte," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "The gentle soul who just wanted everyone to be happy." Final strike. Grindstone fell, and this time, he didn't get up. Cappuccino stood there for a long moment, his katana still burning, his coffee still boiling. He had done it. Had killed the person most responsible for his family's death, had gotten his revenge, but Grindstone had been right. It didn't feel good. Didn't feel like victory. Didn't feel like anything except more emptiness, more darkness, more confirmation that he was now a monster who could never go back to being anything else. He thought about the packaging Grindstone had mentioned, his son's remains, kept as a trophy. Part of him wanted to find it, to take it, to bury it properly next to Cappuccino. But another part of him couldn't bear it, couldn't face the reality of holding what was left of his children in his hands. In the end, he left. Walked out of the office, out of the compound, past the bodies of guards he had killed, into the morning light. He had completed his mission, had avenged his family, had killed every grinder involved in their deaths. And now Now, he had nothing. No family, no purpose, no reason to continue. He was empty, completely and totally empty. A cup with nothing inside, a weapon with no target, an assassin with no mission. He walked without direction, without destination, just walked. Away from the compound, away from the death, away from everything. Days passed, weeks. He kept walking, kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant pain. He took jobs, assassination jobs, because it was all he knew how to do anymore. People would hire him to kill their enemies, and he would do it efficiently and without question. The money meant nothing to him. He would take the jobs for almost nothing, just enough to buy food, to keep moving. He became famous in the underworld. The Black Flame Assassin. The coffee cup who could kill anyone, anywhere, anytime. People whispered about him in fear, said he was unstoppable, said he was death itself. They weren't wrong. Years passed. Many years. Cappuccino lost count, lost track of time. Every day was the same. Wake up, take a job, kill, sleep, repeat. Endless, meaningless, empty. Until one day he received a message, not a job offer, something else, an invitation, to a wedding, Latte's wedding. Cappuccino stared at the message, his hands shaking. Latte, his son, one of his coffee beans. But that was impossible. Latte was dead, had been ground 3 years after being captured. The file had said so clearly. But what if the file was wrong? What if they had made a mistake? What if somehow, impossibly, one of his sons had survived? With trembling hands, he researched the name on the invitation. Latte, coffee bean, living in a different city, working as a chef. It couldn't be. But what if it was? He had to know, had to see, had to find out if his son, his beautiful, gentle Latte, had somehow survived. He traveled to the city, found the address on the invitation, stood outside the small restaurant where Latte supposedly worked. And through the window, he saw him, a coffee bean, about the right age, working in the kitchen, cooking, looking happy. But was it really him? After so many years, how could Cappuccino be sure? He stood there for hours, watching, trying to decide. Part of him was terrified to go inside, terrified to hope. Because if this wasn't his son, if this was just someone with the same name, the disappointment would destroy what little remained of his soul. But he had to know. He walked into the restaurant. It was small, cozy, with only a few tables. The coffee bean saw him enter and smiled. "Welcome." Table for one? Cappuccino looked at him, really looked at him, and his heart stopped. Because he knew with complete certainty, this was Latte, his son. Older, grown up, but unmistakably his child. He had the same eyes, the same gentle smile, the same energy. "Latte," Cappuccino whispered. The coffee bean's smile faltered. He looked at Cappuccino more closely, and his eyes widened. "Papa?" And then they were both crying, embracing, holding each other like they would never let go. Years of grief and pain and loss all coming out in that moment. They sank to the floor, still holding each other, both of them shaking with sobs. "I thought you were dead," Cappuccino kept saying. "I thought I lost you. I thought they ground you." "I thought you were dead too," Latte said through his tears. "After they took us, after they took Mama and Espresso, I thought I'd never see you again. I thought I was alone." "Espresso?" Cappuccino pulled back, looking at Latte with desperate hope. "What about Espresso? Is he—" Latte's face fell. He shook his head slowly. "No, Papa. Espresso didn't make it. They ground him. The first day we were there. They made me watch, but I survived. Someone helped me escape. A guard who had a change of heart. He got me out, got me to safety, and I've been living here ever since, trying to build a new life, trying to honor Espresso's memory by living..." Cappuccino felt his heart break all over again. One son saved, one son lost. It should have felt like a victory, getting Latte back. But all he could think about was Espresso. How he had died alone and scared. How Cappuccino hadn't been there to protect him. How he had failed again to keep his promise. "I'm sorry," Cappuccino said. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you both. I tried. I trained. I killed so many of them. But it wasn't enough. I failed you." "Papa, no," Latte said firmly. He took Cappuccino's face in his hands, made him look at him. "You didn't fail. You saved me by teaching me to be strong, by showing me what love looked like, by giving me memories of what family meant. You survived. I survived. And we found each other again. That's not failure. That's a miracle." They talked for hours that day. Latte closed the restaurant early, and they sat at one of the small tables and they shared everything. All the years they had been apart, all the pain, all the healing, all the rebuilding. Latte told Cappuccino about his life, about how he had started over in this new city, about how he had learned to cook, using food to bring joy to others the way his papa had used coffee, about how he had met Mocha, a kind coffee bean who had helped him heal, who had loved him despite his trauma, about how they were getting married in 2 weeks and he had sent the invitation on a whim, hoping against hope that somehow, somewhere, his papa was still alive and would receive it. And Cappuccino told Latte everything too, about the training, about becoming an assassin, about the revenge, about the emptiness, about how he had been living but not really alive, just going through the motions, waiting for death. "Come to the wedding, Papa," Latte said. "Please, let me show you my life. Let me introduce you to Mocha. Let me show you that good things can still happen, that there can still be joy after pain." Cappuccino wanted to say no. Wanted to say he didn't deserve joy, didn't deserve to see his son happy when Espresso would never be happy again. But the look in Latte's eyes, the hope there, the love, made him nod. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll come." And he did. 2 weeks later, at a small church in the city, Cappuccino attended his son's wedding. He stood in the back, dressed in clean clothes Latte had bought him, looking more like a normal coffee cup than he had in years. He watched as Latte married Mocha, a sweet coffee bean with kind eyes who clearly loved his son very much. And for the first time in over a decade, Cappuccino felt something other than pain. Not happiness. He wasn't capable of that anymore. But something close. Pride, maybe. In his son. In how strong he had become. In how he had survived and healed and built a life despite everything. After the ceremony, Latte came to him. "Thank you for coming, Papa." "I wouldn't have missed it," Cappuccino said. And he meant it. "Papa, I want you to do something for me," Latte said. He took Cappuccino's hand. "I want you to stop. Stop being an assassin. Stop killing. Stop running. Come live here. Be part of my life. Be a grandfather someday when Mocha and I have children. Let yourself heal. Please." Cappuccino looked at his son, at this gentle, forgiving, incredible being who had every right to hate him, to blame him, to turn him away. But who instead was offering love, offering family, offering a chance to be something other than a weapon. "I don't know if I can," Cappuccino said honestly. "I don't know if there's anything left of me to heal. I'm broken, Latte. I'm so broken." "Then let me help put you back together," Latte said. "The way you put me back together when I was little and would fall down. You'd pick me up, dust me off, and tell me everything would be okay. Let me do that for you now. Please, Papa." Cappuccino couldn't speak, couldn't find words. So he just nodded and pulled his son into an embrace. And in that moment, surrounded by people celebrating love, holding his surviving son, thinking about his lost son and his lost wife, Cappuccino felt something crack inside him. Not break, not shatter, but crack, like a seed cracking open before it can grow, like ice cracking before the spring thaw, like a door that had been locked for years finally starting to open. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. Still a possibility that he could be something other than an assassin, that he could heal, that he could honor his family's memory not through revenge and death, but through living, through being a father to Latte, through meeting his future grandchildren, through finding small joys in everyday moments. It wouldn't be easy. The darkness inside him was still there, would always be there. The guilt and the pain and the loss would never fully go away. But maybe, with Latte's help, with time, with effort, he could learn to live with it, to carry it without being consumed by it. He stayed in the city, got a small apartment near Latte's restaurant, started having dinner with Latte and Mocha once a week, started learning to be part of a family again. It was hard, so hard. Every day was a struggle, but every day he tried. For Latte, for the memory of Espresso and Cappuccina. For himself, he still had nightmares, still woke up screaming sometimes, still saw their faces in his dreams, heard their voices calling for him, still felt the crushing guilt of not saving them. But now, when he woke up from those nightmares, he had someone to call. Latte would come over, or would talk to him on the phone, and would remind him that he wasn't alone, that he was loved, that he had done his best, that it was time to forgive himself. Cappuccino didn't know if he would ever truly forgive himself, but he could try, could take it one day at a time, could keep living, keep breathing, keep moving forward. Not for himself, for Latte, for the family they still had. A year later, Latte and Mocha had twins, 2 little coffee beans, a boy and a girl. They named the boy Espresso after the brother Latte had lost. And when Cappuccino held little Espresso for the first time, when he looked into those innocent eyes, he finally cried. Really cried. Not tears of rage or pain, but tears of grief and love and hope, all mixed together. "Hello, Espresso," he whispered to the tiny coffee bean. "I'm your grandpa, and I promise I'll be here for you. I'll protect you. I'll love you. I'll tell you about your uncle, about how brave he was, about how much he was loved." The baby made a small sound, wrapped his tiny hand around Cappuccino's finger, and Cappuccino felt that crack inside him open a little bit more, felt light starting to seep in through the darkness. He would never be whole again, would never be the coffee cup he had been before. That person was dead, had died in a garden many years ago. But maybe he could be someone new, someone who carried the past but wasn't consumed by it, someone who remembered the dead but lived for the living. It would take time, years probably, maybe his whole life. But he had time now, had a reason to use that time, had people who needed him, who loved him, who wanted him to stay. So he stayed. He put down his katanas, hung them on the wall as a reminder of what he had been and what he'd never wanted to be again. He stopped taking assassination jobs, started helping Latte at the restaurant instead, making coffee for customers, using his old skills for something good again. He told his grandchildren stories, not about his kills, not about his revenge, but about their grandmother Cappuccina, the beautiful dancer, about their uncle Espresso, the brave goalkeeper, about love and family and the importance of cherishing every moment because you never know when it might be your last. He visited the old village sometimes, would stand by Cappuccina's grave and talk to her, tell her about Latte, about the grandchildren, about how he was trying to heal, about how he hoped she was proud of him, even though he knew he didn't deserve it. The wind would blow, the flowers would sway, and sometimes, just sometimes, he would feel like she was there, like she heard him, like she forgave him, like she was telling him it was okay to move on, to live, to find what happiness he could in the time he had left. And slowly, so slowly he barely noticed it happening, the darkness inside him began to recede. Not disappear. It would never disappear. But recede. Become manageable. Become something he could live with instead of something that consumed him. Years passed. Cappuccino grew old. His cardboard body, once strong and deadly, became brittle and weak. His coffee, once boiling with rage, cooled to a comfortable warmth. His katanas gathered dust on the wall, symbols of a past he had moved beyond, He spent his days with family, with latte and mocha and the grandchildren. He taught them to make coffee, told them stories, watched them grow and learn and become their own people. And he found, to his surprise, that there was still joy to be had in life. Small joys, quiet joys. The kind he had known before in his first life, before everything fell apart. And one night, when he was very old, when his cardboard was crumbling and his time was clearly running short, he went to sleep in his little apartment. And he dreamed. He dreamed he was back in the village, back in his small house. And Cappuccina was there, as beautiful as ever, smiling at him, reaching out her hand. "Come, love," she said. "Come dance with me." And he took her hand. And they danced. And behind them, he saw Espresso, his brave little goalkeeper, laughing and kicking a football. And the dream felt so real, so vivid, so right. "I missed you," Cappuccino said. "I know," Cappuccina said, "but you did good. You survived. You healed. You loved again. I'm so proud of you." "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," he said. "I know," she said, "but you saved Latte. And you saved yourself. That's enough." And they danced under the stars, a family reunited, if only in dreams. And Cappuccino felt at peace for the first time in decades. He never woke up from that dream. His old body simply stopped, gave up, let go. And he died peacefully, a smile on his face, his coffee finally at rest. Latte found him the next morning, and though he cried, though he mourned, he also knew that his papa was finally free, finally with the family he had lost, finally at peace. They buried Cappuccino in the old village next to Cappuccina. Latte and Mocha and the grandchildren all attended. They told stories. They laughed and cried and remembered, and they celebrated a life that had been tragic and beautiful, and ultimately redemptive. On the gravestone, Latte had inscribed, "Cappuccino, beloved husband, father, and grandfather." He knew great pain, but he also knew great love. He fell, but he got back up. He was lost, but he found his way home. "Rest now, Papa. Dance with Mama, play with Espresso. We'll carry your story forward. We'll remember. Always." And that's how the story of Cappuccino Assassino ends. Not with a grand battle, not with glory or redemption or perfect healing, but with an old coffee cup dying peacefully, surrounded by love, having done the hardest thing possible, learning to live after loss. They say that on rainy nights you can still see him, Cappuccino and Cappuccina, dancing together in the village square, little Espresso playing football nearby, all of them together again, all of them at peace, all of them home. And maybe it's true. Maybe love is strong enough to transcend death. Maybe family bonds are unbreakable, even by tragedy. Maybe there's a place where all the broken people go to be made whole again. Or maybe it's just a story, a way for the living to cope with loss. A way to believe that the ones we've loved and lost aren't truly gone, but just waiting for us somewhere, ready to welcome us home when our time comes. Either way, the story reminds us of something important. Life is fragile, love is precious, family is everything. And even when we're broken, even when we think there's no way forward, there's always a chance, a possibility, a small crack through which light can enter. We just have to be brave enough to let it in. This was the story of Cappuccino Assassino, the coffee cup with a broken heart, the father who lost everything and almost lost himself, the assassin who learned eventually that living is braver than dying, that healing is harder than revenge, that love, in the end, is stronger than hate. Remember him, remember his family, remember their love, and remember that even in your darkest moments, even when all hope seems lost, there might still be a way forward. There might still be light. There might still be a reason to keep going. You just have to be brave enough to find it. Sleep now, little ones. Close your eyes. Dream of better things. Dream of love and family and second chances. Dream of coffee cups who learn to live again. Dream of light breaking through darkness. Dream of hope. And remember, even the strongest coffee eventually grows cold, but the warmth it brought, the comfort it gave, the love it represented, that never fades, that lives on forever. Tongue, tongue, tongue. Sleep well, dream of better endings, and wake up ready to write your own story. A story where love wins, where families heal, where broken things are made whole again. Good night.